Chapter 2872. Ma Yujie was not worried about Ma Yujie. He knew that this fellow had made ample preparations when he decided to enter the Yin underworld. Based on Zhuowen's understanding of Ma Yujie, the latter must have his own secret passage to leave the Yin corpse sect. When he thought up to here, Zhuowen muttered with slight shame. "Brother Ma, looks like I have to ask you to be my shield this time. A creation-grade divine herb ought to be sufficient to make it up to you. Senior Brother Jun, what are you talking about?" Qiu Linglong looked at the muttering Zhuowen in confusion. Ever since Zhuowen told Qiu Linglong his name, she no longer called him Junior Brother Shaowen. Instead, she called him Senior Brother Zhuo. "Nothing, Junior Sister Qiu. I might have to stay in your cave for a few days. After I rescue Elder Yin, I'll leave. I won't be a burden to you," Zhuowen said with a smile. Qiu Linglong nodded but did not say anything. Her eyes flashed with helplessness. In fact, she had tried to persuade Zhuowen to leave the Yin corpse sect. Yin Wuxia was imprisoned in the Blue Moon Lake where Ghost Plume was. It was heavily guarded. Even a creator would not be able to leave the Blue Moon Lake. Unfortunately, Yuan did not listen to her advice. She also knew that it was useless to try to persuade him. At the entrance of the Yin corpse sect, there were piles of bones and eerie Yin qi. Ma Yujie's chubby figure appeared sneakily at the entrance. He looked at the guards at the entrance but did not go over immediately. He did not care about the guards at the entrance. What he cared about was the restriction formation at the entrance. Once he touched the restriction formation at the entrance, he would immediately alert the Yin corpse sect. At that time, the experts in the sect would be dispatched to hunt him down. Fortunately, I had the foresight to dig a shortcut here. As long as I leave the Yin corpse sect, I'll be safe. Ma Yujie grinned and carefully came to a very remote corner. All kinds of skeletons were piled up in the corner. Black qi filled the air, adding an eerie feeling to the place. Ma Yujie didn't care about the filth of these skeletons at all. His hands continued to push these skeletons to the side. Underneath the skeleton, there was actually a small and deep tunnel. Ma Yujie looked left and right. After making sure that no one had seen him, he entered the passage. At the same time, he threw a few array flags at the entrance of the cave. The scattered bones gathered together and covered the entrance of the cave. A few hundred kilometers away from the 10 Extremes Yin corpse sect, a hole was blasted open in the cliff wall. Ma Yujie's fat body crawled out with difficulty. Phew! This trip was unexpectedly smooth. Jun is such a loyal and righteous person. He actually wants to save that Yin Wuxia. Isn't he courting death? I shouldn't say that he's courting death. This guy is definitely dead. However, he was quite honest. Before he died, he left me a creation-grade elixir and a realm-eluding underworld flower. Ma Yujie revealed a wretched smile and took out the creation-grade elixir and the realm-eluding underworld flower from his spirit ring. Like a miser, he flipped the two elixirs over and over again. However, Ma Yujie quickly realized that something was wrong. He kept the creation-grade elixir and only kept the realm-eluding underworld flower. He looked at it over and over again and even extended his divine sense to check. Ma Yujie's expression changed because he realized that the realm-eluding underworld flower was fake. Didn't this guy want to entrust the realm-eluding underworld flower to me and give it to the Pill Array Immortal Alliance to save his friend? Why did he give me a fake realm-eluding underworld flower? Ma Yujie didn't care too much about the realm-eluding underworld flower. Therefore, when he received the realm-eluding underworld flower from Zhuowen, he didn't check it carefully and didn't realize that it was a fake. However, now that he had observed it and realized that it was fake, he became even more suspicious. He didn't know if Zhuowen did it intentionally or not. If it was intentional, then the realm-eluding underworld flower that this guy took from the ancient ruins might be fake. However, if it was intentional, then the reason behind it was very thought-provoking. Suddenly, the realm-eluding underworld flower in Ma Yujie's hand surged with a blazing light. Along with the blazing light, a terrifying energy kept expanding, as if it would explode at any time. Ma Yujie's expression changed drastically, and an ominous feeling rose in his heart. Without thinking, he immediately threw the realm-eluding underworld flower away and quickly left. Boom! The realm-eluding underworld flower exploded like a bomb. Terrifying waves of air rose, forming a huge mushroom cloud. Because the explosion was simply too terrifying, and because it happened right next to the 10 Extreme Een Corps sect, it immediately activated the restrictions on the surface of the 10 Extreme Een Corps sect. Waves of light flowed out of the restrictions, attracting the attention of all the cultivators within the sect. Not good, someone is causing trouble in our sect. Who is so bold to blow up our 10 Extreme Een Corps sect? Is he tired of living? We must catch the culprit and let him have a taste of living a life worse than death. I will let him know the consequences of offending our 10 Extreme Een Corps sect. A stone stirred up 1,000 ripples. All the cultivators in the 10 Extreme Een Corps sect were enraged. Even the upper echelons of the sect were alerted. One by one, figures rushed out and rushed towards the explosion site. And, fuck you, you tricked me. Ma Yujie wanted to cry, but no tears came out. He finally understood why Zhuan was so generous this time and gave him a creation-level divine medicine. It turned out that he wanted to use him as bait to lure away the experts in the 10 Extreme Een Corps sect, and then this guy would take advantage of the situation. Although Ma Yujie really wanted to rush into the 10 Extreme Een Corps sect and cut Zhuan into pieces, when he saw the cultivators in the 10 Extreme Een Corps sect. However, when he saw the black mass of cultivators rushing towards him from within the 10 Extreme Een Corps sect, he knew that he would be courting death if he rushed in now. Zhuan, just you wait. Next time, I will make you suffer so much that even your parents won't recognize you. Ma Yujie threw down these vicious words, took out his flying divine weapon, and quickly left the place. He knew that if he didn't leave now, he wouldn't be able to. He could feel that the creation-level experts in the 10 Extreme Een Corps sect were on the move. Although he was tough and strong, he would still be tortured badly if he went up against the creation-level experts. Above the surface of the Blue Moon Lake, Ge Ling slowly stood up in the luxurious pavilion floating in the air. A glint flashed across his eyes. Senior Brother Ghost Plume, someone is causing trouble at our sect's entrance. I suspect that it might be Zhuowen's doing. Sakyamuni walked in from outside the pavilion, his eyes filled with excitement and cruelty. I think so too. This guy is really bold. Is he provoking the 10 Extreme Een Corps sect? Ghost Plume said with a cold gaze. Hee, this fits Zhuowen's personality. This time, the commotion is too big. It has already alerted my master and 4 other elders. Senior Brother Ghost Plume, let's go. Chapter 2873. Luring the tiger from the mountain. Ghost Plume thought for a moment, then finally agreed to Sakyamuni's suggestion. He had heard from Sakyamuni about Zhuowen's background, and knew that he came from one of the 8 heavenly domains. He had only been in the Xianmi heavenly domain for a few hundred years, but he was able to become an immortal master of the Pil Array Immortal Alliance, and his strength was so terrifying. He suspected that there was a huge secret on him. Although this kid is an immortal master of the Pil Array Immortal Alliance, he has to pay a price for offending the 10 Extremes Een Corps sect. Today, we will capture him and let him know the price of offending the 10 Extremes Een Corps sect. Ghost Plume stood up and left the Blue Moon Lake with Sakyamuni, rushing toward the sect's entrance. Inside Qiu Linglong's cave, Qiu Linglong hurriedly came in and said to Zhuan, Senior Brother Zhua, someone is attacking the 10 Extremes Een Corps sect. I don't know who is so bold. Zhuo Wen's gaze was calm, and he was not surprised. He said, it's that friend of mine. He holds a deep grudge against the 10 Ultimate Een Corps sect, so before he left, it is very normal for him to give your sect a few blows. Qiu Linglong's beautiful eyes were filled with a strange expression. She also felt that there was something fishy, but she did not say it out loud. Senior Brother Zhua, Ghost Plume of the Blue Moon Lake, has already left, and the commotion this time was too big. 4 elders in the sect were alarmed, and they left their secluded cultivation to chase after the troublemaker. Your friend will be fine, right? Qiu Linglong's beautiful eyes were filled with worry. She felt that Ma Yujie's life was in danger. Zhuan did not care, and he waved his hand to reassure Qiu Linglong. Ma Yujie had countless trump cards, and this guy was not simple. His ability to escape was even better than his. Although the Ten Extremes In Corpse sect was powerful, as long as the sect master, Senki In, did not appear, he felt that Ma Yujie would be fine. At most, he would be chased until he was exhausted. Moreover, Yun had already found out from Qiu Linglong that the sect leader of the Ten Extremities In Corpse sect, Senki In, was currently not in the sect. Instead, he was a guest at the Scarlet Mountain Villa. No matter how big the commotion was, Senki In would not appear. Junior Qiu, I'm going to the Blue Moon Lake. It's best if you don't tell anyone about me. Otherwise, you might be implicated. Zhuan cupped his fists at Qiu Linglong and left the cave. Qiu Linglong's beautiful eyes flashed with a complicated look. She didn't go out to send them off. She could only help up to this point and didn't dare to have too much contact with Zhuan. If not, she might be in danger as well. After leaving Qiu Linglong's cave, Yuan headed straight for the Blue Moon Lake. The Ten Extremities In Corpse sect's territory was very large. During the time he was in Qiu Linglong's cave, he had studied the internal geography of the Ten Extremities In Corpse sect. He knew that the cave residences of the Ten Extremities In Corpse sect's upper echelons were basically far apart. For example, the Blue Moon Lake where Ghost Plume resided was tens of thousands of kilometers away from the fourth Elder Ba Jingwei's cave residence. Even if he flew, it would take a quarter of an hour. In addition, Ba Jingwei, Ghost Plume, and many other experts in the sect were attracted by the commotion caused by Ma Yujie. Zhuan had enough time to enter the Blue Moon Lake and rescue In Wuxia. Soon, Zhuan arrived near the Blue Moon Lake. Along the way, he saw many disciples of the Ten Extremities In Corpse sect rushing out of the sect with anger. The deeper he went into the sect, the fewer people there were. There was no one outside the huge courtyard where the Blue Moon Lake was located. Apart from the private guards belonging to Ghost Plume, this place was very secluded. The Blue Moon Lake was surrounded by the radiance of a formation restriction. Zhuan was no stranger to this formation. When he first entered this courtyard, he had already discovered that there were 3 types of Genesis Tier Grand formations fused together. They were an illusion formation, a trap formation, and a killing formation. Zhuan had already studied these 3 grand formations. Now that he was here again, Zhuan immediately used the Primordial Chaos Infinity to break these 3 grand formations. In less than 3 breaths of time, Zhuan had broken the 3 grand formations one by one. The ripples of the formation being broken spread out, attracting the attention of the guards in the courtyard. Who is it? How dare you trespass into Lord Ghost Plume's Blue Moon Lake? More than a dozen cultivators rushed out. They were basically all eternal overlords. Among them, the middle-aged man in the lead was the strongest. He was a half-step Genesis tier expert. Zhuan couldn't be bothered to talk nonsense with these people. He took a step forward, and his body emitted a crystalline light. He punched out fiercely, smashing into the nearest cultivator. You're courting death. A mere Heavens Will Master actually dares to trespass on the Blue Moon Lake. See if I don't kill you. This cultivator was stunned. He naturally noticed that Zhuowen's aura was not strong. He was only a Heavens Will Master. When he came back to his senses, a sinister smile appeared on his face. He raised the long saber in his hand and slashed at Zhuowen's fist. The middle-aged man and the other guards didn't make a move. They all watched this scene with cold smiles. They all wanted to see how this arrogant Heavens Will Master would be cut in half and die tragically in front of them. Bang! Zhuan shattered the cultivator's long saber with a punch. His long fist was like a rainbow, and it landed on the cultivator's body like a hot knife through butter. A terrifying power exploded, and it was as if Mount Tai was pressing down. The cultivator screamed as his body was torn into a bloody pulp. His divine soul dissipated, and he died just like that in front of everyone. The middle-aged man and the group of people who were watching the show were dumbfounded. Their faces were filled with disbelief. Zhuan didn't give them time to be stunned. After killing the cultivator with a single move, he dove into the crowd like a dragon. He executed the tyrannical Dao slaughtering technique with both hands, and his entire body turned into a killing machine as he wantonly slaughtered. None of the guards present could withstand a single punch from Zhuan. They were all killed with a single punch. The middle-aged man was scared out of his wits. His forehead was covered in cold sweat. He roared in fear in his heart. How could he encounter such a terrifying cultivator? What kind of freak was this? He was clearly a Heavenswell master, but killing eternal overlords like them was as easy as killing chickens. This was too terrifying. Go to hell. The moment Zhuan killed the last cultivator with a single punch, his cold gaze fell on the middle-aged man. The latter trembled all over when he noticed Zhuan's gaze. He hurriedly knelt and begged for mercy. More than a dozen eternal overlords had been killed so easily. Even he couldn't do it, but the young man in front of him had done it so easily. He knew he was no match for this young man, and he didn't want to die. He could only kneel and beg for mercy. I can spare your life, but I need you to do something for me, Zhuan said coldly as he came before the middle-aged man. He didn't attack again. Sir, please speak. I'll tell you everything I know. The middle-aged man was scared out of his wits. He didn't dare to disobey Zhuan. Where is Yin Wuxie imprisoned at Blue Moon Lake? Zhuan asked. This. The middle-aged man hesitated, as if it was difficult to speak. Speak or die. Choose for yourself. Chapter 2874. Saving Yin Wuxie. The middle-aged man felt Zhuan's murderous intent and trembled. He quickly said, I'll talk. Elder Yin is imprisoned at the bottom of the Blue Moon Lake. That's Ghost Plume's private place. It's a forbidden area of the Blue Moon Lake. We've never been there before. You know where it is? Take me there. Zhuan said indifferently. The middle-aged man was helpless. His life was in Zhuan's hands, so he had to listen. Soon, the two of them dived into the Blue Moon Lake. The middle-aged man led the way while Zhuan followed behind. Zhuan's divine sense was firmly locked on the middle-aged man to prevent him from playing any tricks. At the bottom of the lake, the two of them stopped in front of a 3-story pagoda-like building. The surface of the building was very shabby and covered with moss. Obviously, it had been there for a long time. At the bottom of the pagoda, there was an iron fence. It was pitch black inside. Zhuan tried to extend his divine sense into the pagoda and found that his divine sense was suppressed. There was an array in the pagoda that blocked divine sense. Boom! Zhuan blasted the iron fence open with a punch. He didn't go in but let the middle-aged man go in first. The middle-aged man's legs trembled. He didn't want to enter the forbidden area, but Zhuan forced him to. He had to bite the bullet and go in. Not long after the middle-aged man went in, he suddenly screamed and then there was no sound. Zhuan's eyes narrowed slightly as he pondered in his heart. This pagoda was not simple. However, he did not give up because of this. Since he had already come this far, even if this pagoda was dangerous, he would still continue to step inside and rescue Yin Wuxie. After entering the pagoda, he immediately felt a terrifying pressure. Then, purple light blades swept around him. The light blades were very dense and sharp. They were very fast. Zhuan didn't have time to react. His whole body was enveloped by the light blades, and blood splattered everywhere. Dozens of terrible wounds appeared on Zhuan's body, and blood kept flowing out. Zhuan was shocked. His body was already a 5-star Pangu's sacred body, which was extremely powerful. But the light blades easily cut through his body. What kind of power was this? Before Zhuan could come back to his senses, another wave of light blades swept out from the surrounding walls. Only then did Zhuan notice that there were extremely complicated patterns on the surrounding rock walls. They crisscrossed and intersected with each other. The light blades were formed from these patterns. At the same time, he also noticed that there was nothing else on the first floor of the ancient pagoda other than the stairs in the corner. As for the middle-aged man, he had turned into a pile of meat and scattered to the side. Clearly, the middle-aged man had also been attacked by these light blades. However, this middle-aged man did not have Zhuan's Pangu's sacred body, so he could not resist the first wave of light blades and died there. As Zhuan dodged the attacks from the light blades, he quickly healed his body and approached the staircase. When he reached the staircase, he immediately went up to the second floor. The light blades on the second floor were denser and more powerful. As soon as Zhuan entered the second floor, he was immediately blasted into a bloody mist by the endless light blades. Fortunately, Zhuan's self-healing ability was too strong. The bloody mist continued to condense. In a few breaths, Zhuan reformed his body and quickly rushed toward the staircase to the third floor. On the second floor, Zhuan's body was blasted into pieces more than 10 times, and he was blasted into a bloody mist every time. After paying the price of more than 10 times, Zhuan reluctantly reached the staircase and entered the third floor with difficulty. After entering the third floor, Zhuan let out a long breath because he found that there were no light blades on the third floor that he was afraid of. It was extremely quiet, just like an ordinary attic room. Zhuan rested for a while before looking at the third floor. At a glance, he saw the cross in the depths of the floor, where a figure was tied up. This figure was Yin Wuxia. However, at this moment, Zhuan almost couldn't recognize Yin Wuxia. He saw that Yin Wuxia was as thin as a matchstick, like a dried-up person. The aura on his body was extremely weak, like a candle in the wind that could be extinguished at any time. At Yin Wuxia's feet, there was a black skull. This skull was only the size of a palm, and on the top of the skull, there was a strange flower. On the stamen of this flower, there was a face that looked like a vengeful spirit, and it was emitting a heart-palpitating roar. The sound was like a human scream before death, and it made people shudder. Realm Elusive Underworld Soul Flower? Zhuan was no stranger to the strange flower growing on the black skull. It was the Realm Elusive Underworld Soul Flower that he had found in the underworld. At this moment, he realized that the jaws of the black skull beneath Yin Wuxia's feet were constantly moving up and down, as though it was chewing something. The sound of bones colliding with each other gave off a creepy feeling that made one shudder in fear. Then, Zhuan realized that Yin Wuxia was screaming, and the essence of his body was being sucked away by the skull. The originally skinny Yin Wuxia's eyes were about to pop out, and he looked very ferocious. Zhuan's expression changed slightly. He felt that this skull was too strange. He suddenly punched out with his right fist, and the skull was smashed to pieces. The instant the skull shattered, a sharp, wretched cry rang out. Next, Zhuan sensed an extremely dense essence energy spreading out in all directions. This essence was extremely pure. Zhuan didn't even need to take the initiative to absorb it. It automatically entered his meridians and began to circulate, turning into a part of his body's strength. The moment Zhuan breathed in the essence qi, he felt as if he was on cloud 9. It was like the feeling of an ordinary person smoking opium. It made him very fascinated, and he wanted to continue absorbing this essence and experience that happiness. Zhuan quickly realized that something was wrong. He rolled up his sleeves and collected this essence into a jade bottle. He didn't continue to absorb it. He didn't know what it was, but he guessed that it wasn't anything good. Before he knew what it was used for, he really didn't dare to use it casually. Zhuan took out a divine pill to recover essence and gave it to Yin Wuxia. Yin Wuxia's pale face finally eased a lot. However, Yin Wuxia had lost too much essence. He was as thin as a stick and didn't even have the strength to speak. He could only look at Zhuan with gratitude in his eyes. Then he closed his eyes and fainted. After Zhuan put Yin Wuxia into the outside world, he looked at the remains of the black skull under his feet. He pondered for a moment, but in the end he put it away. He planned to bring it back to the Pill Array Immortal Alliance and ask Ji Wuming about it. There's actually an array here? Zhuan was just about to leave the ancient pagoda when he discovered that behind the cross on the third floor, in a very remote corner, there was a very inconspicuous array. With Zhuan's level of array Dao, it was easy for him to see that this array should be a short-distance transportation array. As for where it led to, Zhuan didn't know. That ghost plume set up an array here. It's definitely not for fun. I'm afraid that it leads to an extremely mysterious place. Zhuan's eyes flickered. He was considering whether to enter the transportation array or not. Let's go in and take a look. After thinking for a while, Zhuan decided to activate the transportation array. He had a feeling that this 10 Extremes Yin Corps sect was hiding some unspeakable secret. Chapter 2875. Dead Man's Flower. Zhuan felt dizzy as the light flickered. When he opened his eyes, he was in a new place. This was an extremely gloomy stone room. The decorations in the stone room were very simple. Other than a stone table and a stone stool in the corner, there were no other decorations. In front of the stone room, there was an iron door. The surface of this iron door was overflowing with complicated patterns. It should have been forged from some kind of powerful or material. Juan tried to attack the iron door with all his strength, but he triggered a powerful mysterious force in the iron door. His right fist was directly blasted into a bloody mist by the reaction force. He grimaced in pain and his eyes were filled with fear. He knew that it was unrealistic to use brute force to break open this iron door. He suspected that there must be something extraordinary behind this stone door. Juan did not continue to attack the iron door. Instead, he began to size up this stone room. To be more precise, he was observing the stone table in the corner. Walking behind the stone table, Juan found a secret compartment behind the stone table. He opened the secret compartment and found a stack of jade slips and an iron key. Juan put away the iron key. He knew that it should be the key to the iron door. He was not in a hurry to open the iron door. Instead, he casually picked up a jade slip and flipped through the contents. His face immediately became serious and unsightly. This jade slip recorded an experiment called the dead man's flower. Once this flower bloomed, it would have an extremely pure essence that could allow a cultivator's cultivation speed to rise to an unimaginable level. Of course, the dead man's flower was a divine medicine that existed in legends. Moreover, it was an extremely insidious divine medicine. According to the records, the materials needed for the dead man's flower were very simple. One of them was the realm-eluding underworld flower. The other was a living cultivator. Moreover, the stronger the cultivator, the higher the grade of the dead man's flower. The higher the grade of the dead man's flower, the faster the cultivator's cultivation would increase. It was said that the effect of a dead man's flower of the same grade was at least hundreds or thousands of times better than a cultivation pill of the same grade. After reading the contents of the jade slip, Juan's face turned ugly. This dead man flower was definitely a scourge. It was actually a divine medicine that relied on stripping the essence of cultivators to cultivate. However, Juan was very puzzled. In any case, he was an eternal grade alchemist, yet he had never heard of this dead man flower before. According to the records, the stronger the cultivator, the stronger the dead man flower would be. Didn't this mean that if this dead man flower was planted on the body of a sky-reaching master, it would be able to bloom into a sky-reaching master flower? Fortunately, the raw material of the death man flower, the realm-escaping underworld soul flower, is not much. I'm afraid that the death man flower will not be produced in large quantities. Juan shook his head and heaved a sigh of relief. He knew very well that if this dead man flower could be cultivated in large quantities, it would definitely be a disaster for cultivators. However, when he flipped open the second jade slip, his expression was very unsightly, and his eyes were filled with shock. In the second jade slip, it basically recorded the experiments of cultivating the dead man flower. The 10 Extremities Corps sect had been conducting experiments in this area for a long time and seemed to have made a breakthrough. Juan flipped through the next jade slips and found that the rest of the jade slips recorded the process of cultivating the dead man flower. Most of them were failures. Although there were successes, the survival rate of the dead man flower was not high. When Juan saw the last few jade slips, he found that the experimenter had found the most direct way to cultivate the dead man flower, which was to absorb the essence of cultivators to maintain the survival of the dead man flower. Moreover, after the dead man flower absorbed enough essence, it even had the possibility of leveling up. At the same time, it could also give birth to the seeds of the dead man flower and cultivate new dead man flowers. The seeds of the dead man flower were not cultivated in the soil, but in the cultivator's body. These seeds grew by constantly absorbing the essence of the cultivator's body. It was said that the growth cycle was very short. Juan put away the jade slip. He realized how terrifying this thing was. If he allowed the Corps sect of the 10 Extremes to spread this dead man's flower, many cultivators would suffer. This was an experiment that went against human ethics. Taking out the iron key, Juan opened the iron door in front of the stone room. With a clang, the iron door opened and a very narrow corridor appeared in front of Juan. On both sides of the corridor were square storage cabinets. The entrance of the storage cabinets was an iron fence. Zhuan looked through the gaps in the iron fence and found that there was a cultivator lying flat on each storage cabinet. These cultivators were pale like zombies. The strangest thing was that there was a black flower blooming on the top of their heads. This black flower was similar to the elusive underworld soul flower, but it was different. The main difference was that the yin qi contained in the black flower was much more terrifying than the elusive underworld soul flower. Dead man flower. Zhuan's expression did not look good. He knew that these black flowers growing from the cultivators' heads were dead man flowers. Zhuan flipped through the jade slip in the stone room and basically knew the general idea of the dead man flower. There were records in the jade slip that the elusive underworld soul flower was refined from cultivators. It was the original dead man flower. Because the elusive underworld soul flower was very rare, there were not many original dead man flowers. In the experiment, the 10 Extremities Yin Corpse sect cultivated the dead man flower seeds from the original dead man flower. Through these cultivated seeds, they were planted into the cultivator's flesh and blood to cultivate the second-generation dead man flower. The original dead man flower was very rare, but the second-generation dead man flower was not small. As long as there were enough seeds and cultivators, there would be an endless supply of second-generation dead man flowers. Obviously, the black flowers growing from the cultivators' heads in the storage cabinets on both sides of the corridor were the second-generation dead man flowers. Zhuan made a rough estimate and found that there were hundreds of cultivators on both sides of the corridor. In other words, there were at least hundreds of second-generation dead man flowers. Not only that, but Zhuan also found that the cultivators whose flesh and blood energy were being devoured by the dead man flowers were not disciples of the 10 Extremities Yin Corpse sect. They were disciples of other forces in the host region. Zhuan even saw cultivators from the Scarlet Mountain Villa, Fallen Star Mountain, and other similar Dao Palace forces lying in one of the storage cabinets. Zhuan guessed that these cultivators should be cultivators who had come to challenge the Yin Nether Hell of the 10 Extremities Yin Corpse sect. These cultivators might have obtained something really good in the Yin Nether Hell and been discovered by the spies of the 10 Extremities Yin Corpse sect. Then, the 10 Extremities Yin Corpse sect sent experts to capture these cultivators and bring them here as nutrients for the dead man flower seeds. The 10 Extremities Yin Corpse sect is really ruthless. They actually did such a cruel experiment. Chapter 2876. Lu Xingjian. If news of the 10 Ultimates Yin Corpse sect spread, they would be attacked immediately. No faction would let go of a tumor like the 10 Ultimates Yin Corpse sect. Having this thought, Zhuan took out a recording crystal and recorded everything that had happened. After he left the 10 Ultimates Yin Corpse sect, he would definitely return to the Pill Array Immortal Alliance and give this recording crystal to Ji Wuming to spread the news. Ji Wuming was the alliance head of the Pill Array Immortal Alliance and had a high prestige in the host region. Adding on the Pill Array Immortal Alliance's status in the host region, if Ji Wuming were to spread this news, most powers would be convinced. At that time, the 10 Ultimates Yin Corpse sect would be finished. However, Zhuan was different. After all, he was alone and weak. Moreover, he was only a newly promoted celestial master. He did not have a strong foundation. If it were him, he might be attacked by the Yin Corpse sect. After recording, Zhuan walked deeper into the corridor. He had seen the jade slip in the stone room and knew that this was the deepest part of the 10 Ultimates Yin Corpse sect. It was very secretive and also the 10 Ultimates Yin Corpse sect's biggest secret. In the 10 Ultimates Yin Corpse sect, only the true upper echelons had the authority to enter this place. Zhuan knew that Ghost Plume was in the Blue Moon Lake. Since there was a transportation array to enter this place, it was obvious that Ghost Plume had a very high status in the 10 Ultimates Yin Corpse sect. He was probably not just the #1 genius. According to the Jade Slip, Senki Yin cultivated a total of 9 original dead man flowers. The second-generation dead man flowers were cultivated from the seeds of these 9 original dead man flowers. Zhuan thought as he walked deeper into the corridor. He had seen the contents of the Jade Slip and knew that the 9 original dead man flowers were hidden in the deepest part of the corridor. The second-generation dead man flowers here were cultivated from the seeds of the original dead man flowers. As long as the original dead man flowers were taken away, the 10 Ultimates In Corpse sect would lose the source of the seeds. It would be impossible for the 10 Ultimates In Corpse sect to cultivate a new second-generation Dead Man flower unless they cultivated a new original Dead Man flower. Zhuan went deeper. It had to be said that this underground space was very large. Zhuan passed through corridor after corridor. Between the corridors, there were iron fences that contained mysterious energy. Zhuan looked at the contents of the jade slip, which recorded the method to open the iron fence. Therefore, these iron fences were not much of a hindrance to Zhuan. As Zhuan continued to descend deeper into the underground space, the originally noisy In Corpse sect became much quieter. One figure after another returned to the sect from the outside world. Most of the cultivators had looks of unwillingness on their faces. Among this group of cultivators, there were 8 people. These 8 people all had vast auras, and their eyes were cold. It was obvious that they were people of high status. Among the 8, Ghost Plume and Sakyamuni were among them, but their expressions weren't particularly good. Apart from Ghost Plume and Sakyamuni, the remaining 6 were 6 of the 10 great elders of the In Corpse sect. Among them was the 4th elder, Ba Jingwei, the 8th elder, Mao Xinho, the 6th elder, Fan Jiaoyang, the 7th elder, Gong Zipeng, and the 10th elder, Gu Hongkai. What was most noteworthy was that all of these elders, including Ba Jingwei, were looking at one of the old men with reverence in their eyes. Even their postures were subtly following behind this old man. This old man was very famous in the In Corpse sect. Ranked above Ba Jingwei, he was the 3rd elder, Lu Xingjun. He was also a creation lord, and his strength was even greater than Ba Jingwei's. Old Ba, go and investigate that cultivator for me. Where did he come from? The few of us attacked together, but we still couldn't take him down. In the end, he escaped. Lu Xingjian's expression was ugly. He looked sternly at Ba Jingwei behind him and said coldly. Ba Jingwei lowered his head and hurriedly complied. He didn't dare to disobey Lu Xingjian. However, there was a trace of disdain and coldness in the depths of Ba Jingwei's eyes. Lu Xingjian's cultivation was slightly higher than his, roughly at the mid-stage creation lord realm. However, Ba Jingwei knew that tens of thousands of years ago, Lu Xingjian's status had been below his. Back then, Lu Xingjian had only been at the early-stage creation lord realm, while Ba Jingwei had been at the mid-stage. However, Ba Jingwei had participated in the assassination of Yu Xian and had been severely injured by Yu Xian's final counterattack. Because of his injuries, his cultivation had fallen to the early-stage creation lord realm. In the In Corpse sect, which was a sect that greatly valued the strong, a drop in cultivation meant a drop in status. Ba Jingwei was originally the 3rd elder, but he was overtaken by Lu Xingjian. In the end, the position of 3rd elder was given to Lu Xingjian, and Ba Jingwei became the current 4th elder. According to the sect's rules, the elders ranked at the top had the right to command the elders ranked at the bottom. Therefore, Ba Jingwei had no choice but to accept Lu Xingjian's orders. Moreover, he had to act subservient in front of Lu Xingjian. Lu Xingjian was quite satisfied with Ba Jingwei's attitude. He continued, I found the token of a patrolling soldier from the underworld on the cultivator who escaped just now. I remember that the person in charge of issuing the token is Elder Shi, right? 6th Elder Fan Jiaoyang hurriedly said, yes, Elder Shi often uses this banner to embezzle a lot of resources. However, I always thought that Elder Shi would only give the token to the sect's disciples. However, I didn't expect Elder Shi to be so bold as to give it to a cultivator outside the sect. This time, our In Corpse sect has suffered a great loss. Elder Shi can't absolve himself of the blame. Elder Lu, let this old man capture Elder Shi and wait for your judgment. Fan Jiaoyang reacted quickly. He hurriedly walked out and cupped his hands at Lu Xingjian with a fawning smile. Lu Xingjian nodded and said, then I'll have to trouble Elder Fan. Fan Jiaoyang grinned and left the place. After a while, he brought a haggard old man to Lu Xingjian. Bang! Fan Jiaoyang rudely threw the old man to the ground in front of Lu Xingjian. The old man didn't seem to feel pain. He hurriedly jumped up and knelt in front of Lu Xingjian. He repeatedly kowtowed and said, 3rd elder, please spare my life. I know I was wrong. You know what you did wrong? Lu Xingjian said coldly. I shouldn't have sold the token to others so casually. It caused a cultivator from outside the sect to sneak into our Yin Corp's sect. Elder Shi's voice trembled as he confessed. Now you know you were wrong? It's too late. Lu Xingjian's eyes were cold and ruthless. His right hand formed a claw and slammed into Elder Shi's head. Boom! Chapter 2877. Ghost Plume's Wrath. Elder Lu, that cultivator has taken on so many of our attacks. His injuries are extremely serious. I'm afraid he's not far from death, Ba Jingwei suddenly said. Lu Xingjian coldly looked at Ba Jingwei and said, Elder Ba, a serious injury doesn't mean death. Watch your words. Ba Jingwei frowned and fell silent, no longer refuting Lu Xingjian. Contact Blood Prison. Those assassins from Blood Prison appear and disappear unpredictably. They are much better at searching compared to us. Hire some Blood Prison assassins to kill off that cultivator. We will not let off those who offend our 10 Extreme Yin Corp's sect easily. Otherwise, the reputation of our 10 Extreme Yin Corp's sect will be sullied. Lu Xingjian's gaze was cold and indifferent. Although Ba Jingwei was displeased, he could only nod in agreement. Elder Lu, there's nothing for me to do here. I'll go arrange the Blood Prison assassins first. Ba Jingwei did not want to stay here any longer. He cupped his hands at Lu Xingjian and left. Lu Xingjian did not stop him. He only looked at Ba Jingwei's departing figure indifferently. Then he waved his sleeve and said, Go and arrange for the informants in the sect to gather as much information as possible about that cultivator. The more detailed, the better. Once I find out who that cultivator is, I'll not only kill him, I'll also destroy the power behind him. I'll uproot him and destroy his family. Everyone agreed and quickly dispersed. Lu Xingjian also left the place and headed for his own cave. Sakyamune and Ghost Plume didn't leave, but their expressions didn't look too good. Originally, when they learned that there was a foreign cultivator causing trouble near the sect and escaping from the sect, they thought that it was Jun. However, when they chased after him, they discovered that the troublemaker was not Juon, but a fat man. Moreover, the fatty was very despicable. As he fled, he kept cursing. He cursed almost everyone who was chasing after him. If this wasn't a big deal, the fatty's mouth wasn't ordinary. Not only did he curse them, but he also cursed their 18 generations of ancestors and anyone related to them. At that time, all the cultivators who were chasing after the fatty, including Lu Xingjian, had ugly expressions on their faces. They felt that the fatty was asking for a beating. However, that fatty's ability to escape was simply too powerful. Even though Lu Xingjian had gathered Ba Jingwei and the other 5 elders, they were still unable to catch up to that fatty. They were only able to use long-range attacks to seriously injure that fatty. That Juan should have been brought in by Yin Wuxia. Since the one who escaped wasn't Juan, then where could that Juan be? Sakyamune frowned, puzzled. Ghost Plume said in a deep voice, I'm not sure, but I'm sure that Juan is still in the 10 Extremes Yin Corp's sect. If he left the 10 Extremes Yin Corp's sect, it's impossible for there to be no news from our sect. Sakyamune nodded, feeling a little helpless. Although he hated Juon to the bone, he couldn't wait to find him and kill him. However, he had completely lost all clues. He didn't know where Juon was, let alone take revenge. Suddenly, the communication jade talisman at Ghost Plume's waist lit up. He sensed something and opened the communication jade talisman. His expression suddenly became very ugly. Senior brother Ghost Plume, what's wrong? Sakyamune saw that Ghost Plume's expression was not right and quickly asked. My cave abode has been destroyed. I have to go back and take a look. Ghost Plume's expression was anxious. He didn't explain much and hurriedly left the place. Sakyamune was surprised. Ghost Plume was the #1 monster in the 10 Extremes Yin Corp's sect. Moreover, his status in the sect had always been very high and respected. In the sect, almost everyone knew the location of Ghost Plume's cave abode. Who was so bold as to destroy Ghost Plume's cave abode even though they knew it was his cave abode? When Gui Ling returned to his cave abode, he saw the dilapidated courtyard, the destroyed formation restriction, and the corpses of the dead guards lying on the ground. His eyes burned with rage. Who is it? Who dares to cause trouble in my cave abode? Ghost Plume was so angry that he stomped his feet and roared furiously. He had never suffered such humiliation before. The anger in his chest was difficult to suppress and urgently needed to be vented. Sakyamuni arrived soon after. He was shocked when he saw the ruins around the Blue Moon Lake. Someone actually dared to destroy Ghost Plume's cave abode. This person was too bold. Sakyamuni didn't doubt that if Ghost Plume found the culprit, he would definitely beat him to death to vent his anger. Senior brother Ghost Plume, do you think it's Zhuowen? Since Elder In Wuxie is related to Zhuowen, and Elder In was imprisoned by you, Sakyamuni suddenly said. Ghost Plume calmed down. His expression changed greatly. He kicked off with his right foot and dived into the Blue Moon Lake. Sakyamuni also realized that his guess might be correct. He hurriedly followed behind Ghost Plume. Not long after, Ghost Plume and Sakyamuni dived to the bottom of the lake and arrived in front of the ancient pagoda. Sakyamuni was no stranger to the ancient pagoda. Ghost Plume had brought him here before. It was also at that time that he learned about the 10 Extremities In Corpse sect cultivating the Dead Man Flower. Of course, Sakyamuni didn't think that cultivating the Dead Man Flower was a big deal. Instead, he quickly accepted it, because the essence energy provided by the Death Flower could greatly increase his cultivation speed, allowing him to quickly level up. Instead, he was addicted to the pleasure of absorbing the Death Flower. Senior brother Ghost Plume, this ancient pagoda has traces of human activity, Sakyamuni said with a grave expression. Ghost Plume's expression was ferocious. He took a deep breath and calmed himself down with great difficulty. Then, he led Sakyamuni into the ancient pagoda. Ghost Plume knew the ancient pagoda all too well. The moment they entered the pagoda, blades of light flew towards them. However, the trajectories of these blades of light seemed to be fixed. Ghost Plume stood there, but the blades of light actually flew around him, not attacking him at all. Thump thump thump. Ghost Plume and Sakyamuni walked up the stairs and finally arrived at the 3rd floor of the ancient pagoda. When they saw the empty 3rd floor of the ancient pagoda, Gui Ling's expression changed drastically. It really was Zhuowen. He saved In Wuxie, Sakyamuni muttered to himself. Ghost Plume was silent. He quickly went behind the cross and saw the teleportation array on the ground. His eyes were filled with killing intent. Junior brother Shirtian, quickly go find Elder Ba and the others. Zhuowen has entered the secret room. We must kill him. Otherwise, I'm afraid our 10 Extremes In Corpse sect will be in trouble. Ghost Plume instructed Sakyamuni and entered the teleportation array. With a flash of light, Ghost Plume disappeared from the teleportation array. Sakyamuni didn't enter the teleportation array. Instead, he left the ancient pagoda and prepared to inform Ba Jingwei and the other elders. He knew that it was very likely that Zhuowen had passed through the teleportation array and entered the underground secret room. Chapter 2878. Deep in the secret chamber, Zhuowen's eyes were solemn as he stared at the cold iron door in front of him. His expression did not look good. The patterns on the iron door in front of him were complex and clear, and they were filled with mysterious power. What made him even more fearful was the cold air that spread from the surface of the iron door. Even he felt terrified by it. In addition, an extremely powerful restriction was set up on the surface of the iron door. This restriction was of a very high level. It should be a peak Genesis grade formation. It covered the surface of the iron door, making the iron door even more terrifying. Zhuowen tried to break open the iron door with brute force, but he was sent flying by the reaction force of the iron door. Moreover, the cold air that spread from the surface of the iron door was very terrifying. It spread from Zhuowen's right arm to his entire body, almost freezing half of his body into ice. If it were not for the fact that Zhuowen's Pangu sacred body was extremely extraordinary, Zhuowen would have died when he attacked the iron door. This is the deepest iron door in this underground chamber. It's also the most powerful iron door. If I want to open this iron door, I have to break the restriction on the surface of the iron door. Zhuowen's eyes were solemn. He knew that it was basically impossible to break open the iron door by force. Thinking of this, he sat down cross-legged and waved his sleeve, summoning array flags. He formed a seal with both hands and used the profound primordial infinity at the same time. This restriction was indeed difficult to deal with, but it was not at the level of the creation grade. At most, it was at the peak of the Genesis grade. As long as the restriction was not at the level of the creation grade, with Zhuowen's current level of formation skills and the profound primordial infinity, it was not difficult to break it. Zhuowen's technique was very familiar. Waves of formation breaking energy spread out from his hands and landed on the restriction in front of him. Suddenly, the light of the restriction on the surface of the iron door began to shake rapidly. All kinds of light surged like waves in the sea. It was extremely turbulent. Zhuowen's eyes were calm. The power of the primordial infinity continued to surge out from his fingertips, causing the formation on the metal door to become even more turbulent. However, amidst this chaos, Zhuowen could clearly feel that the restrictive power on the surface of the iron gate was weakening. Sensing this change, Zhuowen's eyes widened. He knew that this restriction wouldn't last for long. As long as he could break the restriction, he would have a way to open the last iron door. While Zhuowen was breaking the formation, in the outermost stone room of the underground chamber, there was a flash of brilliance, and a handsome young man appeared. The young man looked around and saw that the iron door at the front of the stone chamber had been blasted open. His face turned ugly. This youth was none other than Ghost Plume. Gui Ling's gaze shifted and landed on the stone table in the corner. He took a step to the front of the stone table and saw that the secret compartment at the back of the stone table had been opened. The jade slips that were piled up in the secret compartment were all gone. His eyes burned with rage. You actually dared to take away such a secret. Today, I'll make sure you die a miserable death. Ghost Plume suppressed his anger and smashed the stone table to smithereens with his right hand. He then took a step forward and rushed into the depths of the iron door. Kacha! A muffled sound, like glass shattering, spread out in the surroundings. Zhuowen suddenly opened his eyes, and joy appeared in his eyes. Countless cracks had appeared on the surface of the iron door. These cracks weren't from the door itself, but from the restriction placed on the surface of the door. He knew that the restriction on the surface of the iron door was about to be broken. Finally, the cracks spread to the extreme and finally shattered into fine powder. Behind the restriction, the lines on the surface of the iron door became even clearer. It was as if the fog had dissipated, making it even clearer. Zhuowen couldn't contain his joy. He stomped his feet and gathered strength in his right fist before smashing it against the iron door. Rumble! A thunder-like explosion spread out and an invisible wave of air spread out in all directions. The entire underground chamber seemed to be unable to withstand this huge force and began to shake violently. It was as if the sky was falling and the earth was cracking. It was extremely terrifying. The patterns on the surface of the iron door suddenly lit up, and a blue cold air blasted toward Zhuowen. Zhuowen narrowed his eyes and his entire body began to freeze. It seemed as if he would turn into an ice sculpture at any moment. Break for me! Zhuowen's eyes were calm. He didn't care about his current situation. Instead, he used heaven and earth annihilation and a terrifying destructive energy condensed on his fist. Boom boom boom. In an instant, Zhuowen blasted out several hundred punches. The power of each punch was extremely terrifying. It seemed as if they could destroy the heavens and earth and shatter the heavens. The heaven and earth annihilation's essence lay in annihilation. The destructive energy produced by using this essence seemed capable of destroying everything. Terrifying destructive energy permeated through the air. The iron door was finally unable to withstand the overwhelming force and completely shattered. Zhuowen faced the strong wind and stepped through the iron gate. His long hair was blown by the strong wind and fluttered behind him. He looked like a peerless demon god and was in high spirits. In the instant that he passed through the iron door, Zhuowen's eyes were filled with vigilance. His divine sense constantly scanned the area, and he didn't dare to relax in the slightest. Behind the iron door was a very spacious stone chamber. However, this stone chamber was constructed in an extremely luxurious manner. The rock walls were forged from all types of rare ores. The purpose of this stone chamber was most likely to be used to reinforce this secret stone chamber. Holy flame light stone, soul renunciation rock, broken dragon dense sand. Zhuowen kept muttering to himself as he looked at the surrounding rock walls. His eyes were bloodshot. The rock walls of this stone chamber were all made from God of Creation grade materials. Furthermore, all of them were precious God of Creation grade materials. Normally, it would be very difficult for Zhuowen to obtain such materials. However, in the surrounding rock walls, they were everywhere. Zhuowen's heart couldn't help but race. He became extremely hot. Zhuowen hurriedly summoned Xiao He from the great world. "Kid, what are you doing?" "I'm cultivating in seclusion in the sword tomb." "Why did you call this dragon lord out in such a hurry?" Xiao He's gaze was unfriendly as he complained incessantly. "Look at the ores and materials around you. The value of these materials is probably much higher than the sword tomb in the great world, right?" Zhuowen said softly with a smile on his face. Xiao He's gaze fell on the surrounding rock walls. Immediately, his eyes widened as if someone had pinched some lifeline. "Oh my God, there are so many materials." Xiao He's attitude immediately changed 180 degrees. He kept praising Zhuowen and summoned the Blood Immortal Sword and the Death Sacrifice Sword. Chapter 2879. Original Dead Flower. Zhuowen shook his head and ignored the madness of the three divine swords. He looked around and observed his surroundings. He found that the stone room around him was very spacious. Bookcases were placed in most of the space, and jade slips were placed in these bookcases. In addition to the bookcases, Zhuowen also saw the same storage cabinets that he had seen in the corridor before. However, these storage cabinets were not that big. They were only the size of a human head. Inside these storage cabinets were black skulls with blooming black flowers. Zhuowen knew that these were all formed dead flowers. Moreover, Zhuowen could clearly feel that the death flower in this huge stone room contained much more energy than the death flowers in the storage cabinets in the corridor. At the front of these storage cabinets, Zhuowen saw an altar made of jade. Below the altar, there were 9 futons. The 9 praying mats floated in the air, and a golden skeleton sat cross-legged on each praying mat. Although they were skeletons, their surface was golden, and they exuded an indescribable majestic aura. It was obvious that these golden skeletons must have been peerless experts when they were alive. At the top of the skulls of these 9 golden skeletons, there were 9 golden flowers growing. The 9 golden flowers looked very similar to the dead flowers outside. However, the energy revealed on the surface of the golden flowers was too rich. It was much richer than all the second-generation dead flowers outside combined. "I'm afraid this is the original dead flower. What a rich essence. With the help of the essence of these 9 original dead flowers, I'm afraid that my cultivation will progress by leaps and bounds." Zhuowen felt the surging essence energy in the golden flowers. His expression changed slightly, and his eyes became a little hot. Although he was very opposed to the method of making the dead flowers, he had to admit that the essence of the dead flowers was unimaginably beneficial to his cultivation. His original body was already the master of destiny. If he could get one of the original dead flowers, it would not be a problem for his original body to break through to the master of destiny. The surging essence of the flower could even enhance the power of Zhuowen's Pangu sacred body. However, Zhuowen did not act rashly. He could feel that the surface of these 9 primitive dead man flowers was filled with a faint brilliance. The killing intent contained within them was something that even Zhuowen was wary of. He knew that the primordial dead flower was extremely important. The sect leader of the 10 Extreme Yin Corpse sect, Senki Yin, would definitely have set up a terrifying killing array around the primordial dead flower. Zhuowen took a few steps back. With a wave of his sleeve, he swept all the dead man flowers around him into his great world. At the same time, he did not let go of any of the jade slips on the bookshelves around him. With Zhuowen's current strength, everything around him was swept into the outside world in the blink of an eye. What surprised him was that there were close to 1,000 dead man flowers in the stone room. However, he was even more aware that these 1,000 dead man flowers were actually not as precious as a single primitive dead man flower. Suddenly, the sound of something breaking through the air came from the depths of the corridor behind him. It was getting closer and closer. Zhuan narrowed his eyes and released his powerful divine sense like a tide. He immediately discovered that about 100 meters behind him in the corridor, a young man with an unfriendly expression was rushing towards him. Ghost Plume? He has actually returned. Zhuan frowned slightly. Looking at Ghost Plume's expression, he was afraid that Ghost Plume already knew that Zhuan had broken into this underground secret room. Zhuan was even more aware that if Ghost Plume knew, then the other experts of the 10 Extreme Een Corps sect would soon know as well. Time was of the essence. Thinking of this, Zhuan immediately took out the Ho-E godly bow and took out an arrow from his great world. He drew the arrow to a third of an arc, and a terrifying killing intent immediately filled the entire stone room. Zhuan was becoming more and more proficient in using the Ho-E godly bow. Moreover, the arrow shot from the Ho-E godly bow did not need to be stored up. It could be shot out in an instant, and its power was terrifying. Ghost Plume was much stronger than Een Wuxia. Even if Zhuan had the power of a 5-star Pangus sacred body, he would most likely be at a disadvantage in a head-on confrontation with Ghost Plume. Unless Zhuan's Pangus sacred body could reach the peak of the 5-star level, then he would have an absolute advantage in a battle with Ghost Plume. Moreover, time was of the essence. Ghost Plume already knew of his existence, so he would definitely inform the other experts of the sect. He had to get rid of Ghost Plume as soon as possible before those experts arrived. Boom! Zhuan gently loosened the fingers on his right hand. Suddenly, a thunderous sound resounded, and an arrow shot out like lightning. The terrifying killing intent was like an erupting wave that filled the entire stone room, giving people an extremely tragic and suffocating feeling. At this moment, Ghost Plume's body was like lightning, flying through the corridor at an extremely fast speed. Along the way, he saw the iron doors in front of him being opened one after another. His eyes were spitting fire, and he knew that Zhuan had entered the deepest part of the secret chamber. Finally, Ghost Plume arrived in front of the deepest part of the stone room. When he saw the huge iron door being blasted to pieces, the anger in his heart erupted like a volcano. At the same time, Guiling also saw that behind the broken iron door, there was a lofty figure standing tall like a mountain. He saw the young man's mocking smile, and then Ghost Plume's hair stood on end. This was because he felt an unbearable murderous intent. This murderous intent was so terrifying that it invaded his body, making him feel as if he had fallen into an ice cellar. Ghost Plume reacted quickly, and his gaze instantly fell on the arrow that had just left the young man's hand. The speed of the arrow was extremely fast. It tore through the void, releasing the sound of cloth being torn apart. It was extremely ear-piercing. Retreat! Ghost Plume immediately retreated. At the same time, he took out a black and white compass from his spirit ring, formed a seal with his right hand, and pointed at the center of the compass. Suddenly, the black and white compass emitted a blazing light, and 2 terrifying black and white beasts appeared, blocking in front of Ghost Plume. What surprised Zhuan was that these 2 black and white beasts were quite powerful. They were actually able to block the arrow that was filled with murderous intent. However, from the violent trembling of the black and white beasts, it could be seen that they were barely able to block the arrow, as if they would fall at any time. Ghost Plume's expression was not good. This black and white compass was given to him by Sect Master Senki Een, and it was a half-step creation grade divine tool. Its power was much stronger than those Genesis grade divine herbs. However, Ghost Plume did not expect the black and white compass to barely block the arrow. It was clear that the arrow was terrifying and powerful. No wonder this guy is so arrogant. He actually has such a powerful trump card. But without this trump card, he's like a bird with broken wings. He's no threat at all. Ghost Plume's eyes flickered. He knew that Zhuan's strength was not strong, and he mainly relied on this arrow. As long as he could block the arrow, Zhuan wouldn't have to fear him. Chapter 2880. Interrogation. You're so confident because of this arrow? You're nothing compared to me now that you've lost your arrow. Ghost Plume breathed a sigh of relief when he saw the black and white compass deflect the arrow. His gaze fell on Zhuan and he couldn't help but sneer. "You're right. Most of my strength does come from this arrow, but it's enough to kill you," Zhuan said indifferently. Ghost Plume laughed loudly, his laughter full of mockery. Just as he was about to mock Tang Weilin, his face suddenly stiffened. He saw Zhuan leisurely take out another arrow from his spirit ring, knocked it on that ordinary wooden bow, and slowly drew it back a third of an arc boom. Suddenly, a terrifying killing intent filled the entire stone room. Moreover, Zhuan didn't stop there. He clenched his right hand, the veins on his arm bulging as he forcibly drew the bowstring to 2/3 of an arc. His killing intent was magnified several times at this moment. That terrifying killing intent was simply too frightening. It was like a giant wave that filled the entire space, unbridled and unrestrained. This guy, Ghost Plume, was dumbstruck. He didn't expect Zhuan to be able to shoot a second arrow. Moreover, this arrow was even more terrifying than the first. If this arrow was shot out, even the black and white compass wouldn't be able to block it. Ghost Plume was horrified at this thought. He wanted to retreat, but he was entangled by the first arrow. If he wanted to retreat, he would have to endure the first arrow's attack. "Damn it!" Ghost Plume cursed. His eyes flashed with determination as he gave up on the black and white compass and turned to flee. The moment Ghost Plume gave up on the black and white compass, the black and white behemoth dissipated. The first arrow, filled with killing intent, shot out explosively and blasted into Ghost Plume's back. Ghost Plume was already prepared. He shifted his body several inches to the side, allowing the arrow to pass through his shoulder blade and into the stone wall beside him. "Poochie!" Ghost Plume let out a muffled groan and spat out a mouthful of blood. His face was pale and bloodless as he fell to the ground. But very quickly, he crawled back up and continued to flee forward. Zhuan's eyes were cold. He loosened the fingers on his right hand and the second arrow shot out. It carried a fierce killing intent like an angry dragon. Ghost Plume screamed. He frantically tried to escape, but the arrow was too fast. Moreover, the killing intent in the arrow had locked onto Ghost Plume. No matter where Ghost Plume went, he would be hunted down by the arrow. "Poochie!" The arrow pierced through Ghost Plume's back, bringing with it a mist of blood. The Ghost Plume was sent flying into the air by the terrifying force of the arrow, then heavily smashed into the rock wall in front of him. His entire body was embedded in the rock wall, creating a human-shaped crater. Zhuan took a step forward and lifted Ghost Plume with his right hand. At this moment, Ghost Plume's entire body was twitching. A mist of blood burst out, and he was on the verge of death. The killing intent in the arrow was terrifying. The moment it hit Ghost Plume, the killing intent flooded Ghost Plume's entire body. Not only did it severely injure Ghost Plume's physical body, but it also severely injured Ghost Plume's soul. At this moment, Ghost Plume's consciousness was somewhat muddled. Zhuan didn't kill Ghost Plume. Instead, he stored him in the outside world and flew towards the secret room's entrance. Not long after, he arrived at the stone room in front of him. Zhuan bluntly destroyed the teleportation formation in the stone room. After destroying the transmission array, Zhuan took Ghost Plume out again and asked, "Are there any other transmission arrays in this underground secret room apart from this one?" Ghost Plume's eyes had turned white. His consciousness was muddled, and his body was twitching violently. Zhuan frowned slightly. He took out a heart-calming and spirit-nourishing pill and had Ghost Plume swallow it. The heart-calming and spirit-nourishing pill was an eternal-grade divine pill. Moreover, it was specially made to treat injuries to the soul. It was one of the most precious eternal-grade divine pills. The effect of the heart-calming and spirit-nourishing pill was pretty good. After swallowing it, Ghost Plume's eyes gradually turned white, and he finally regained a trace of consciousness. Ghost Plume's eyes first revealed a confused look, but when he looked at Zhuan in front of him, all the hair on his body stood on end, and a look of fear appeared on his face. He wanted to escape, but he found that the back of his collar was tightly held in Zhuan's hand, making it impossible for him to escape. Moreover, his injuries were so serious that he didn't even have the strength to mobilize the power in his body, let alone break free from Zhuan's grip. "You've got guts." You broke into this underground secret room without permission and dared to hurt me. You've committed an unforgivable crime. If you don't confess now, you may still have a way out. Ghost Plume's voice was trembling, and there was a trace of panic in his tone. Who's the one giving a way out now? Juan slapped Ghost Plume to the ground. The latter fell to the ground in a sorry state. His cheeks were swollen and swollen. Ghost Plume's eyes were spewing fire, but after sensing Juan's biting cold murderous gaze, the anger in his heart was immediately extinguished. Right now, his injuries were too severe. In front of Juan, he was no different from a mortal without the strength to truss a chicken. If Juan wanted to kill him, it would be very simple. Moreover, Ghost Plume was even more afraid of the terrifying arrow on Juan's body. Just now, he had been seriously injured by Juan's terrifying arrow. Juan stepped on Ghost Plume's back. The latter groaned and spat out a mouthful of blood. He lay face down on the ground, unable to get up no matter how hard he struggled. I'm the one asking you a question. If you dare say another word, I'll kill you. Juan's eyes were cold, and his voice was filled with killing intent. Ghost Plume trembled. He knew that Juan would definitely do as he said and kill him, so he cleverly shut his mouth and didn't say a word. I'll ask you one more time. Is there another teleportation array in this underground secret room? If you don't tell me the truth, I can search your soul. However, I can't guarantee that your soul won't be in danger during the process. Juan's eyes narrowed, and the sharp aura in them caused Ghost Plume's expression to change drastically. He understood the meaning behind Juan's words. Juan, this underground secret room is very important. Now that you've trespassed here, the sect leader won't let you off. When the time comes, you'll face the endless pursuit of the 10 ultimate Een Corpse sect. If you let me go and promise that today's matter won't be leaked, I'll definitely protect you and let you leave the 10 ultimate Een Corpse sect safely. Ghost Plume made a solemn vow and looked at Juan with a fervent gaze. Slap. Unfortunately, Ghost Plume was greeted with a resounding slap that stunned Ghost Plume. I don't believe your promise at all. I'll ask you for the third time now. Is there another teleportation array here? If you still don't answer, then you won't have the chance to. Chapter 2881. The Illegitimate Child. There's another teleportation array hidden in the deepest stone chamber of this underground chamber. Ghost Plume had no choice but to reveal the location of the second teleportation array. Juan carried Ghost Plume and returned to the deepest part of the underground chamber, arriving at the spacious stone chamber. Most of the items in the deepest part of the stone chamber had been plundered clean by Juan. At this moment, it looked very spacious and empty. At the center of the stone chamber, the altar was still standing. Below the altar, the 9 primitive dead flowers were emitting a dazzling golden radiance. Surging essence energy was constantly surging upwards, forming a terrifying essence energy vortex. Juan threw Ghost Plume to the ground and said with a cold gaze, "Speak. Where is the second teleportation array in this stone chamber?" Juan was puzzled. When he was searching the stone chamber earlier, he didn't find any teleportation arrays. Therefore, he could only ask Ghost Plume. Ghost Plume pointed at the ground about 7 inches in front of the primitive dead flowers and said, "There is a palm-sized pattern there. Channel your energy into the pattern and the teleportation array will naturally appear." Ghost Plume didn't dare to deceive him. His life was now in Juan's hands. If he hid anything and was discovered by Juan, he would die a miserable death. After all, Juan could easily soul search him and then kill him. After sealing Ghost Plume's energy, Juan walked to the spot 7 inches away from the primitive dead flowers and gently wiped away the soil on the ground with his right hand. Soon after, he discovered that under the soil, there was indeed a palm-sized pattern tile. Juan didn't act blindly without thinking. Instead, he lifted Ghost Plume and undid the seal on Ghost Plume's body. He coldly said, "Activate this pattern." Ghost Plume's expression was unsightly. He knew that Juan didn't trust him. However, he felt extremely helpless in his heart. He knew that he had to do as Juan said. After all, his life was now in his opponent's hands. Ghost Plume barely managed to channel a sliver of energy into the pattern, causing it to emit a dazzling light. Soon after, Thuan discovered that, with the pattern as the center, complex array patterns appeared. Zhuan could tell at a glance that the pattern of the array formation was a teleportation array. However, Thuan soon realized that something was amiss. The light from the teleportation array grew brighter and brighter until it eventually engulfed Ghost Plume. This guy wants to escape? Zhuan reacted quickly. He pointed with his right hand and immediately used the space-time sacred art. A huge space-time river emerged, circling above the teleportation array that was densely covered in light patterns. A purple sun smashed over without warning, and instantly, time stopped. Although the time stopped was very short, it was enough for Zhuan. Zhuan took a step forward and rushed to the teleportation array like lightning. His right hand formed a claw and grabbed Ghost Plume's shoulder, which was covered in the light of the teleportation array. Then he twisted it fiercely. Ghost Plume screamed, but his eyes revealed a resolute look. He did not hesitate to cut off his shoulder. Blood splattered, but he did not slow down and wanted to completely teleport away. Unfortunately, Yuan could not do as Ghost Plume wished and used the space-time sacred art to the extreme. The space-time river in the surroundings continued to condense into a terrifying space-time river that engulfed the entire teleportation array. Instantly, the teleportation array that had been activated came to a standstill. Although the time stop only lasted for a breath of time, it was more than enough for Zhuan. Zhuan's right hand was like lightning. He grabbed Ghost Plume's head and pulled, forcibly pulling him out of the teleportation array. The moment Ghost Plume was pulled out of the teleportation array, the light from the teleportation array reached its peak and quickly dimmed. Clearly, the teleportation was over. Ghost Plume was thrown to the side in a daze. He knew that he was done for. Zhuan ignored Ghost Plume. Instead, he clenched his right hand into a fist and punched the teleportation array without restraint. A terrifying energy burst out, and the ear-piercing sound of glass shattering came from the teleportation array. Zhuowen's power was very terrifying, rudely destroying this transmission array completely. After doing all this, Zhuowen's gaze landed on Guiling, who was not far away. The killing intent in his eyes was no longer concealed and was on the verge of bursting out. Guiling felt the terrifying killing intent and his whole body trembled violently. However, he still said with fear in his voice, "Zhuowen, you can't kill me. I'll tell you now that I have another identity. I'm the son of Sect Master Sun Qin. If you kill me, my father won't let you off." Zhuowen's gaze was strange. Ghost Plume was one of the 5 freaks of the host region and the #1 genius of the 10 Extremes Yin Corps sect. He knew all this. However, he never knew that Ghost Plume was the son of Senki Yin. If Ghost Plume was telling the truth, then this matter must be known by everyone in the host region. Ghost Plume could also see the disbelief in Zhuowen's eyes. He hurriedly said, "I'm only the illegitimate son of the sect master. This isn't something to be proud of, so it hasn't been made public. However, the sect master truly treats me as his own son. If you kill me, you know the consequences when the sect master returns and finds out." Ghost Plume seemed to have gained a bit of confidence when he said this, and there was a hint of arrogance in his voice. Unfortunately, Zhuowen raised his hand and slapped Ghost Plume, slamming his head into the ground. Zhuowen walked over with large strides and lifted Guiling up once more. After that, he used his right hand to slap Guiling's face without restraint, causing the sounds of slapping to ring out continuously. After Ghost Plume was beaten black and blue, Zhuowen finally stopped and threw him to the ground. "Ghost Plume, so what if you're the son of Senki Yin? Even if Senki Yin provoked me, I still dared to beat him up, not to mention you're just his son," Zhuowen said expressionlessly. Ghost Plume trembled with anger, but at the same time, he was even more terrified. He realized that Zhuowen was completely fearless. He didn't even put Senki Yin in his eyes. He probably wouldn't even blink when killing him. "I don't want to play guessing games with you anymore. I didn't want to kill you, but unfortunately, you didn't cooperate at all. Now, I can only search your soul." Zhuowen didn't want to waste any more words with Ghost Plume. He placed his right hand on Ghost Plume's head, intending to search his soul. His soul had been modified by the Panga banner, so it was much stronger than Ghost Plume's. Naturally, it wasn't too difficult to search his soul. Ghost Plume's pupils shrank to the size of needles. He hurriedly said, "I know I was wrong. Please let me go this time." Ghost Plume finally put down his dignity and begged Zhuowen for mercy. Unfortunately, Zhuowen didn't care at all. He was determined to search Ghost Plume's soul. "I know how to undo the formation on the surface of the original dead flower. As long as you let me go, I can help you take it out." Chapter 2882. Devouring Essence. Zhuowen stopped what he was doing and looked at Ghost Plume with interest. He didn't expect Ghost Plume to know how to undo the restriction on the surface of the undead flower. Zhuowen had examined the restriction before and found it to be very powerful. Even if he used the primordial everlasting sword, it would be very difficult for him to break it. That was why he didn't immediately try to undo the restriction on the surface of the undead flower. Instead, he first searched through the other items in the stone room before slowly studying the restriction on the surface of the undead flower. Now that Ghost Plume said he knew how to undo the restriction on the surface of the undead flower, Zhuowen didn't doubt him too much. There were a total of 2 teleportation arrays in the depths of this underground secret room. One of them led to Ghost Plume's cave abode, while the other led to Senki Yin's cave abode. From this, it could be seen that Senki Yin truly valued Ghost Plume, his illegitimate son. In that case, it was reasonable that Ghost Plume knew how to undo the restriction on the surface of the undead flower. Seeing Zhuowen slowly remove his right hand, Ghost Plume sighed in relief. However, his eyes were filled with bitterness. "Since you know, why don't you undo the restriction on the surface of the undead flower for me to see? If you can undo it, I promise to spare your life. If you can't, then you can just die." Zhuowen's eyes were cold and merciless. He wasn't polite to Ghost Plume at all. He knew that Ghost Plume wouldn't yield to force, so his attitude had to be firm. Ghost Plume's eyes flickered. He said in a deep voice, I need you to swear a heavenly oath. If I can undo the restriction on the undead flower, then you must spare my life. Otherwise, you will suffer a backlash from the heavens." "You don't believe me?" Zhuowen grinned. His smile contained a biting cold intent. Ghost Plume couldn't help but shrink back. "Ghost Plume, you should know that as long as I search your soul, you won't be able to keep any secrets from me," Zhuowen said calmly. Ghost Plume's eyes flickered, but he shook his head and said, "You don't understand at all. This primitive death flower restriction is powerful, but Sect Master also imposed a bloodline restriction on it. Only cultivators with his bloodline are qualified to break this restriction. If you are not related by blood, even if you know the method to break the formation, you will still fail in the end and be devoured by the power of the formation." Bang! As soon as Ghost Plume finished speaking, he felt as if he had suffered a heavy blow to his chest. He spat out a mouthful of blood and fell heavily to the ground not far away, his entire body twitching. Guiling struggled to get up and looked at Zhuowen in front of him with a face full of fear. "Ghost Plume, let me tell you, Zhuowen, hate being threatened the most. Do you think I will tolerate you just because you threaten me?" Zhuowen's eyes were filled with disdain. "After I kill you and obtain the method to break the formation from you, I will try it myself, and you will be dead for sure. There are only 2 paths in front of you now. Either you break the formation for me or you die. As for making me swear an oath to the heavenly Tao to be bound by you, don't think too much about it. That is impossible." Zhuowen's attitude was very unyielding. Ghost Plume's face paled. In the end, he lowered his head and stopped bargaining with Yun. He knew that this method wouldn't work on Zhuowen. Ghost Plume staggered over to the primitive death flower restriction. He bit the tip of his tongue and spat out a mouthful of essence blood, his hands forming a series of seals. This time, Ghost Plume didn't play any tricks. He was really afraid. He knew very well that if he dared to play any tricks, Hyun would really kill him. Zhuowen silently watched Ghost Plume's every move. He didn't let down his guard. This Ghost Plume was very cunning, and he wouldn't make the same mistake. However, when he saw the restriction on the surface of the primitive death flower gradually dim, he slowly relaxed. He knew that Ghost Plume was really trying to break the formation. After about half an incense stick's time, the restriction on the surface of the primitive death flower finally began to crack. Finally, it shattered with a bang. The moment the restriction shattered, a terrifying wave of essence energy erupted and filled the entire stone room. Originally, the essence chi emitted by the primordial dead flower was already terrifying enough due to the obstruction of the restriction. Now that the restriction had shattered, the majority of the essence energy accumulated within the restriction was like a wild horse that had broken free of its reins. It was vast and majestic. Zhuowen's eyes lit up with excitement when he sensed the powerful essence energy emitting from the restriction. Ghost Plume immediately retreated after breaking the restriction. His eyes were filled with apprehension and even some fear. Zhuowen sensed Ghost Plume's abnormality, but he didn't immediately charge forward. Instead, he looked at Ghost Plume indifferently. Ghost Plume felt his scalp go numb from Zhuowen's gaze. He could only brace himself and say, "Tuan, the raw materials used to cultivate the primitive death flower were all early-stage creation realm experts when they were alive. They were defeated by the sect master and were captured by the sect master. After the sect master cultivated these 9 primordial dead man flowers, he left behind several backup plans. The restriction and bloodline restriction were only 2 of them. The other backup plan was these 9 golden bodies. If you want to obtain the 9 primitive death flowers, you have to defeat the 9 golden bodies. Otherwise, you don't have the right to obtain them." Zhuowen nodded. He only believed half of Ghost Plume's words. Defeating the 9 golden bodies to obtain the primitive death flowers was probably the right thing to do. As for how strong the 9 golden bodies were, Zhuowen wasn't sure. He also knew that even if he asked Ghost Plume, the latter probably wouldn't tell him the truth. However, from Gui Ling's performance, the strength of these 9 golden bodies was not ordinary at all. Zhuowen imprisoned Ghost Plume again and threw him into the outside world. Then he clasped his hands together and his body emitted a crystalline radiance. At the same time, black vortexes emerged around Zhuowen's body. These vortexes weren't large, only the size of a thumb. However, there were many of them and they densely covered his entire body. A terrifying devouring power was generated from these black vortexes. Soon after, the surging essence emitted from the 9 primitive dead man flowers on the heads of the 9 golden bodies was rapidly absorbed into Zhuowen's body. In the process of absorbing the essence, Zhuowen's body became more and more crystalline. Zhuowen's eyes were full of surprise. The essence of the primitive death flowers was actually so beneficial to his body that it could promote the evolution and consolidation of his body. Although the speed of evolution was very slow, at least it did make his body evolve. Since the Pangu sacred body had advanced to 5 stars, it had become extremely picky about energy. The special class Heavenly Path crystal was useless to the current Pangu sacred body. No matter how many special class Heavenly Path crystals he absorbed, his Pangu sacred body showed no signs of evolution. However, the primitive death flowers were different. They could actually make his body evolve. Moreover, this was only the essence of the primitive death flowers. If he absorbed the primitive death flowers, the evolution of his Pangu sacred body would probably be even faster and more terrifying. Chapter 2883. Battle Golden Body. What Zhuowen didn't notice was that when he was crazily absorbing the essence of the primordial dead flower, the one in front of the 9 golden bodies moved slightly. Its golden head turned toward Zhuowen. 2 golden flames suddenly flickered in its empty eye sockets. A vast and terrifying aura escaped, causing the entire stone chamber to tremble. Zhuowen naturally felt this terrifying aura. He looked at the golden body in front of him that was slowly standing up. Boom! The golden flames in the golden body's eye sockets flickered violently. The entire stone chamber seemed to be in a furnace. The temperature was frighteningly high. The golden body suddenly jumped, causing the ground to shake. It appeared in front of Zhuowen as if it had teleported. Its right fist was shining with golden light, and it directly punched toward Zhuowen's face. Zhuowen's body was crystal clear. Instead of retreating, he clenched his right fist and punched out. His joints creaked, and a strong wind swept out, forming a terrifying storm. Boom! The 2 fists collided, and a thunderous sound exploded. Terrifying waves of air spread out with the 2 of them as the center, sweeping everything around them. Zhuowen let out a muffled groan and continued to retreat. The golden body took a step back and stabilized its body. Both of its feet once again pushed off the ground and shot out like an arrow. Its speed was extremely fast as it continued to attack Zhuowen. Zhuowen's eyes were gloomy. This golden body was very powerful. It was worthy of being an early-stage creation master when it was alive. Although it was only a skeleton now and its strength had decreased, it was still around the late-stage creation master. Its strength was comparable to Yin Wuxie's. Zhuowen did defeat Yin Wuxie in the past, but he relied on Hou Yi's divine bow and not the power of his Pangu sacred body. According to Zhuowen's estimation, his current 5-star Pangu sacred body should be able to fight an early-stage creation master, but he would definitely be at a disadvantage. Just now, when he fought with the golden body, he knew that he would not be able to defeat the golden body. However, Zhuowen was not discouraged, nor was he prepared to use the Hou Yi divine bow. This golden body's strength was not much stronger than his, and it was just the right target for him to hone his strength. Kill! Zhuowen's fighting spirit soared to the sky. He pounced over like a wild beast, and fought with the golden body. The terrifying aftermath spread out, and turned the space of the entire stone room upside down. While Zhuowen was fighting the golden body, the devouring vortexes all over his body were like a whale sucking in water, sucking in the surrounding essence energy. Furthermore, in the process of fighting with him, the golden body was constantly consuming its essence energy. He took a step forward, and his body was full of green. Ring-shaped waves of air rolled out, and it was extremely terrifying. Then Zhuowen performed the tyrannical Tao slaughtering skill, and his fists turned into the world's sharpest weapons. He quickly blasted them out, and they transformed into blurry phantoms. Bang, bang, bang. 8 dull sounds rang out. The moment the 8 golden bodies bombarded Zhuowen, they were all blown away by a terrifying force. They smashed into the surrounding rock walls. The 3 divine swords, who had been collecting precious ores in the surroundings, watched this scene with their mouths agape. Especially Xiaohei, who muttered to herself, "This kid has only advanced by a small realm, and his strength has increased so much." What Xiaohei did not know was that the higher the level of the Pangu sacred body, the more difficult it was to advance. Naturally, the increase was also terrifying. Generally speaking, the primordial dead flower was enough to let a peak eternal overlord cultivator completely step into the 3rd step of the Tao proving realm and consolidate it. However, Zhuowen had used a primordial dead flower to advance from the early stage of 5 stars to the middle stage of 5 stars. This showed how difficult it was to advance the Pangu sacred body. At the instant the 8 golden bodies were blasted flying, Zhuowen bounced off with his legs and shot out explosively. Very soon, he approached the golden body that was closest to him, and he suddenly smashed his fist out with the tyrannical Tao slaughtering technique. It pierced through the golden body's chest and came out from the back. Then, Zhuowen's right hand shook, and the seemingly indestructible golden body shattered into pieces, shattering into golden powder on the ground. Only a golden head and the primitive dead man flower were left. The moment Zhuowen destroyed the 2nd golden avatar, the remaining 7 golden avatars had already stabilized themselves. They fearlessly pounced at Zhuowen again at an extremely fast speed. Chapter 2884. Alarming the 10 Extremes Yin Corpse Sect. Bang, bang, bang. Continuous explosions resounded once again. Immediately, the 7 golden bodies that had besieged Zhuowen were sent flying in a sorry state, and all of them were embedded in the surrounding rock walls. Zhuowen's body was crystal clear and emitted a strong light. His aura was like rising steam, surging upward and forming a mushroom-shaped air wave. At this moment, Zhuowen was like a god or a demon. His long hair fluttered in the wind, and each strand was crystal clear like jade. Boom! Zhuowen took a step forward and rushed to the nearest golden body in an instant. He opened his right palm and pinched the golden body's face. Zhuowen's strength was too strong. The golden body's skull seemed to be unable to withstand it, and dense cracks appeared. The golden body's bony hands, which seemed to be made of gold, waved wildly. It seemed to be at a loss as if it was a drowning person. Boom! Zhuan lifted the golden body above his head and slammed it on the ground. The golden body was pressed to the ground by Zhuan like a toy. A terrifying force spread out from the ground, causing countless cracks to appear on the ground. The cracks spread out in all directions. It was a terrifying sight. Zhuan pressed his right hand on the golden body's skull and used his left hand as a knife. He revealed a powerful sky-splitting blade and drilled it into the golden body's chest like a hot knife through butter. The sharp sky-splitting blade pierced through the golden body's sternum without any hindrance, and then came out of the golden body's spine. Then, the golden body's bones were completely shattered into powder under the effect of such a terrifying force. Zhuan took the golden body's head and stuffed it into the macro world. He then continued to rush toward the remaining 6 golden bodies. After destroying 3 golden bodies in a row, the remaining 6 golden bodies had lost their minds. However, they instinctively sensed danger and began to retreat. Unfortunately, Zhuan naturally would not let them succeed. He used his movement technique and rushed into the 6 golden bodies. He even used the tyrannical Tao slaying technique one move after another. Its power was terrifying and its momentum was shocking. After 30 rounds, Zhuan destroyed the 4th golden body. After 50 rounds, the 5th golden body was blasted into smithereens. In the 150th round, Zhuan's right fist was like an electric drill as it fiercely blasted out. It pierced through the chest of the last golden body, and a terrifying energy burst out. All the bones in this golden body had exploded, leaving behind only a complete golden skull, which Zhuan casually put away into his pouch. Not far away, the weapon spirits of the 3 legendary swords were dumbfounded when they saw this. They felt that the Zhuan was way too heaven-defying. The 9 golden bodies were no weaker than late-stage god of creation stage cultivators, yet they were still defeated by Zhuan so easily. With a wave of his sleeve, Zhuan summoned Ghost Plume from the great world. After casually tossing it aside, he sat cross-legged on the other side. Ghost Plume's entire body was imprisoned. It lay on the ground in a sorry state, unable to move. He looked left and right with a puzzled look in his eyes. This was because he did not find the 9 golden bodies with the original dead flower in the stone chamber. Zhuan ignored Ghost Plume. Instead, he took out the original dead flower. He planned to use the original dead flower to improve his Pangu sacred body. Looking at the original dead flower in Zhuan's hand, Ghost Plume's pupils shrank to the size of needles. It could not help but exclaim, "You defeated the 9 golden bodies? How is that possible?" Even a peak god of creation stage cultivator would not be a match for the 9 golden bodies when they joined forces. However, Zhuan had defeated all of them. This made Ghost Plume feel incredulous. Zhuan ignored Ghost Plume. Previously, he had put it into the great world mainly to prevent it from doing anything that would hinder him. Now that he had defeated all 9 golden bodies, and he did not want to expose the existence of the great world too much, he naturally could not let Ghost Plume stay in the great world for too long. Zhuan held the original dead flower in his hand and began to slowly absorb the essence and energy of the original dead flower. Previously, he had crushed the original dead flower because he was pressed for time. This way, he could absorb all the energy in the flower into his body in a short period of time. This would allow him to advance quickly. However, this also wasted a lot of the energy of the original dead flower. Now that the 9 golden bodies had been defeated, and Ghost Plume was basically useless, there was no threat to Zhuan in this underground chamber. Naturally, Zhuan would not use such a wasteful method to absorb the original dead flower. Streams of golden energy flowed into Zhuan's palm and spread to all the meridians in his body, merging with his flesh and soul. Ghost Plume froze in place, staring blankly at Zhuan, absorbing the energy of the original dead flower. His heart sank to the bottom. The original dead flower was something that Senki Yin valued greatly, even more than his own life. Now, not only had the underground chamber been broken into and its secrets exposed, even the most precious 9 original dead flowers had been snatched away by Zhuan. If Senki Yin knew about this, he would be furious, and Ghost Plume would not be able to get away with it. When the time came, he would have to bear the wrath of Senki Yin. Thinking of this, Ghost Plume felt bitter. He knew that even if Zhuan set him free, he would not have a good ending. He would not be able to escape Senki Yin's punishment, even if he was Senki Yin's illegitimate son. However, it was better than falling into the hands of Zhuan. After all, Zhuan might want to kill him, but Senki Yin would not. After all, he was Senki Yin's direct descendant. While Zhuan was absorbing the energy of the original dead flower in the depths of the underground chamber, the upper echelons of the Yin Corpse sect were shaken. Sakyamune brought the news of Zhuan breaking into the underground chamber to the fourth elder, Ba Jingwei. The moment Ba Jingwei heard the news, his eyes spat fire, and his chest burned with anger. He could not contain it, so he immediately rushed into Ghost Plume's cave with Sakyamune and entered the ancient pagoda at the bottom of the Blue Moon Lake. However, after the two of them activated the transmission array in the ancient pagoda, they found that the transmission array did not work. Ba Jingwei's face was very gloomy. He knew that the transmission array that led to the other side of the underground chamber had been destroyed, so the transmission array in the ancient pagoda was completely ineffective. Damn it, it must be that bastard Zhuowen's doing. He destroyed the transmission array to prevent us from entering the depths of the underground chamber to find him. Sakyamune was also flustered and exasperated. Ghost Plume has already entered. With Ghost Plume's strength, it should not be a problem to capture Zhuan. Ba Jingwei frowned slightly. Sakyamune was somewhat helpless, but there was also a hidden worry in his heart. He always felt that Zhuan was not simple. When he fought with Zhuowen, he was sure that Zhuowen had concealed a portion of his strength. Chapter 2885. Great Elder Gao Yanghong Sakyamune suddenly said, "Master, Yin is not a simple person. We can't let our guard down. I remember that there should be 2 teleportation arrays that lead to the secret underground chamber. Besides Senior Ghost Plume, don't we have another choice?" Ba Jingwei frowned and said hesitantly, "There are indeed 2 teleportation arrays that lead to the secret underground chamber. However, the second teleportation array is in the Sect Master's Cave. You should know that the Sect Master's Cave is heavily guarded. Even I am not qualified to enter. I remember that the Great Elder is guarding the Sect Master's Cave. Master, you can inform the Great Elder and explain it to him. He should let us in. After all, the secret underground chamber is of great importance. We can't afford to lose it," Sakyamune continued. Ba Jingwei's eyes flickered. He was moved. He knew about the existence of the secret underground chamber. He had entered it several times and learned about the existence of the dead flower. He was even lucky enough to obtain a few mature dead flowers. At that time, his cultivation had reached a bottleneck. It was precisely because he had absorbed those mature dead flowers that his cultivation had broken through the bottleneck and advanced to a new realm. Therefore, he had a deep impression of the dead flower. In his heart, he yearned for such a divine medicine with such obvious effects. If some unknown situation happened to the secret underground chamber because of Zhuowen's intrusion, it would be a huge loss for the entire 10 Extremes Yin Corpse sect. I'll send a message to the Great Elder and see what he has to say. Ba Jingwei took out a communication jade talisman and sent a message to the Great Elder, explaining the ins and outs of the matter in detail, especially the matter of Zhuowen breaking into the underground chamber, which he solemnly mentioned. Soon, Ba Jingwei received a reply from the Great Elder. "Shirtian, follow me to the Sect Master's Cave. The Great Elder already knows and is willing to use the teleportation array in the Sect Master's Cave with us." Ba Jingwei's expression brightened. He called out to Sakyamune and left the Blue Moon Lake. Soon, the two of them arrived at the Sect Master's Cave. The sect leader's abode was not as grand as he had imagined. Instead, it was filled with green mountains and clear waters, as if it was an ordinary mountain valley in the mortal world. On the surface of this beautiful mountain forest scenery, there were layers upon layers of restriction lights flashing. Obviously, there was an extremely powerful restriction formation set up on the surface of the Sect Master's Cave mansion. Moreover, it was not just one formation, but many large formations combined to form a terrifying group of formations. At this moment, on top of an inconspicuous rock at the entrance of the valley, a skinny old man sat cross-legged. The old man was dressed in plain black clothes. The only thing that stood out about him was his pair of extremely sharp eyes. They were constantly emitting a breathtaking light, giving people the feeling that they were being stared at by an eagle. The skinny old man in front of him was the Grand Elder of the 10 Ultimate Een Corps sect, Gao Yanghong. His strength was second only to Senki Een within the 10 Ultimate Een Corps sect. Great Elder! Ba Jingwei and Sakyamune bowed deeply to the skinny old man, their eyes filled with awe. Gao Yanghong's face was expressionless. He looked at Ba Jingwei and said, "Elder Ba, are you sure that an outsider has broken into the secret underground chamber? If I find out that you are lying, don't blame me for being rude to you." Ba Jingwei's body trembled, and he hurriedly said, "Rest assured, Great Elder. I'm not lying. You know that there is a teleportation array hidden in Ghost Plume's cave mansion. Zhuan entered the secret underground chamber from the teleportation array in the Blue Moon Lake. That Zhuan is very cunning. He destroyed the teleportation array on the other side." Gao Yanghong nodded. He knew about Ghost Plume's identity, and naturally knew that Senki Een had set up a teleportation array in Ghost Plume's cave mansion. "Come with me," Gao Yanghong said, then led Ba Jingwei and Sakyamune into the valley. After a while, the group of 3 passed through layers of restrictions and arrived in front of a small pool in the deepest part of the valley. Ba Jingwei and Sakyamune's faces were filled with awe and dread. Along the way, they could clearly feel the strong killing intent of the restrictions around them. They had no doubt that if they accidentally triggered these restrictions, they would die without a burial place. Gao Yanghong came to a spot 7 inches in front of the small pool, squatted down, and used his right hand to wipe away the soil, revealing a palm-sized pattern. Gao Yanghong activated this pattern, and the pattern of a teleportation array appeared in the center of the pool. This is the teleportation array set up by Sect Master. "Let's go in." Gao Yanghong's eyes were calm as he stepped into the center of the pool. Ba Jingwei and Sakyamune naturally hurried to follow. "Great Elder, the teleportation array at Blue Moon Lake has been destroyed. Will Zhuan find the second teleportation array in the underground chamber and destroy it as well?" Sakyamune asked as soon as he landed on the pool. Gao Yanghong smiled faintly and said, "You can rest assured that the teleportation array set up by Sect Master here is very secretive. You need to find the corresponding hidden compartment to activate it. The same is true for the teleportation array in the underground chamber. It is impossible for outsiders to find the teleportation array here." Sakyamune nodded, his eyes flashing. He knew that with Great Elder's help, Zhuan was doomed. Thinking that Zhuowen's head was about to be separated from his body, Sakyamune's cheeks flushed with excitement as he imagined the scene of Zhuowen being captured alive and tortured. However, Sakyamune soon discovered that something was wrong because the teleportation array above the pool did not move. He revealed a puzzled expression and looked at Gao Yanghong in front of him. The latter's eyes were gloomy and his hands were still forming seals, but the teleportation array did not move at all. "Great Elder, what's going on?" Ba Jingwei was a little stunned and asked very honestly. Gao Yanghong took a deep breath, but his eyes were spitting fire. He was very angry. "The teleportation array here has been destroyed." Gao Yanghong's voice was very stiff. "What?" Ba Jingwei and Sakyamune were shocked. One had to know that Gao Yanghong had just said that the teleportation array here was very secretive, and the other end of the underground chamber was even more secretive. Zhuan would never be able to find it. However, Gao Yanghong had just made a solemn vow, and the teleportation array was actually unable to be used. This was a ruthless slap to Gao Yanghong's face. Gao Yanghong also felt the surprised gazes of Ba Jingwei and Sakyamune, and his old face turned slightly red. However, his heart was soon filled with anger and disbelief. He was angry that an outsider named Zhuowen had actually destroyed the second teleportation array. What was even more inconceivable was how that guy had found the second teleportation array. Although he knew the location of the second teleportation array, Senki Een had told him about it. If he were to look for it himself, it would be impossible to find it. Sakura opened his mouth but didn't say anything in the end. He knew that Ba Jingwei was afraid that he wasn't strong enough to enter the secret underground chamber. Although Ba Jingwei was doing this for his own good, Sakyamune felt very uncomfortable in his heart. Zhuowen's figure appeared in his mind. Back then, Tian was just an ant in his eyes, but now he had far surpassed him. He had even lost the qualifications to confront Zhuowen. Sakyamune clenched his fists. He was very unwilling, but more than that, he felt helpless. I want to become stronger, Sakyamuni roared in his heart. Ever since he joined the 10 Absolutes In Corps sect, he had always been the fastest cultivating genius. He was envied and looked up to by many of his peers, and the older generation was full of expectations for him. It could be said that Sakura was a monstrous genius who was favored by all. He originally thought that Zhuowen was already not worth mentioning, but he didn't expect that Zhuowen would easily defeat him in the sect, forcefully slapping his face. Sakyamuni knew that Zhuowen had caused great trouble and was definitely going to die, but he was unwilling. Zhuowen's shadow in his heart could not be erased no matter what. Sakyamuni's conviction to become stronger became even stronger. After dealing with this matter, Sakyamuni prepared to go into seclusion again. He would not come out of seclusion until his cultivation reached the third step of the Tao validation realm. Moreover, Ba Jingwei had asked Senki In for some dead flowers so that he could use them when he broke through. Sakyamuni believed that with those dead flowers and his Tao root that was about to surpass the heaven rank, it would be much easier for him to break through. Gao Yanghong was very efficient. He led Ba Jingwei and Sakyamuni to a hidden cave. This cave was very narrow and could only fit around one person. It was pitch black inside, and the occasional breeze that flowed out was even more chilly. Gao Yanghong explained that this cave was the entrance to the secret underground room. However, the energy of the Earth's core was extremely suppressive to cultivators, so it would be very strenuous for them to enter the secret underground room through this passageway. Ba Jingwei didn't mind, and he notified the 10th elder, Gu Hongkai, and the 8th elder, Mao Xinho. He intended to enter the secret underground room with them to capture Zhuowen. Gu Hongkai and Mao Xinho quickly arrived, and Ba Jingwei gave them a simple explanation of their objective. They were first surprised, and then they both expressed their willingness to enter the secret underground room with Ba Jingwei. After they reached an agreement, Gao Yanghong stood at the entrance of the cave and formed seals with his hands. An enormous amount of energy surged into the cave. He used his own cultivation to suppress the energy of the Earth's core within the passageway and reduce the threat of the energy to the lowest level. After Gao Yanghong finished, he gave Ba Jingwei a look. The latter nodded and led the other 2 elders into the passageway. Zhuowen slowly opened his eyes and looked at the withered primitive dead flower in his right palm. His eyes flickered. He had already stayed here for 2 days and absorbed 7 primitive dead man flowers. He had to admit that the primitive dead flower's essence energy was indeed very powerful. Zhuowen relied on the primitive dead flower's enormous essence energy to forcibly raise the level of his Pangus sacred body to the peak of the 5-star level. Zhuowen's strength had also increased greatly. If his 5-star Pangus sacred body could only be comparable to a late-stage Lord of Creation, his current strength was enough to fight against a half-step Lord of Creation. Of course, with the terrifying Pangus sacred body and Zhuowen's terrifying self-healing ability, Zhuowen might not even be a match for an early-stage Lord of Creation, but it wouldn't be so easy for an early-stage Lord of Creation to kill him. At this moment, including the primitive dead man flower he had used earlier, Zhuowen had already used 8 primitive dead man flowers. He only had 1 primitive dead man flower left. Zhuowen didn't use the last primitive dead flower. He knew that if his Pangus sacred body advanced from the peak of the 5-star level to the 6-star level, no matter how much energy it absorbed, it would be useless. He had to find new ancestral wizard venomous insects. Otherwise, it would be very difficult for his Pangus sacred body to continue to advance. As for the last primitive dead man flower, Zhuowen tossed it to his main body to absorb. His original body's cultivation had already reached the peak of the Lord of Destiny. After absorbing the primitive dead flower, he should be able to break through to the Lord of Mystery. Zhuowen separated his original body and gave the last primitive dead flower to him. His original body naturally didn't refuse. After receiving the primitive dead flower, he frantically absorbed it. The aura in his body also rapidly increased. It was very fast, like an awakened beast. It made people's hearts palpitate. Ghost Plume, who had been left aside by Zhuowen, watched Zhuowen use up all the primitive dead flowers with his own eyes. He felt his heart ache. One had to know that Senki Yin had spent a lot of effort to cultivate these primitive dead flowers. Chapter 2887. Ghost Plume's Concealment Boom. A thunderous sound came from the quiet stone room. The aura of Yi Shiwen's original body was like an erupting volcano, becoming more and more terrifying. When it reached its peak, it exploded with a loud bang. Above Yi Shiwen's head, an extremely terrifying pressure of the way of heaven appeared. It was as if an unprecedentedly huge mountain had fallen and smashed onto Yi Shiwen's head. It was very shocking. Yi Shiwen's original body opened his eyes. His face was slightly pale, but his eyes were bursting with excitement. He could clearly feel that the power in his body was transforming, sublimating, and mutating. He knew that he was about to break through. The terrifying way of heaven turned into a terrifying storm. Then, it turned into a substantial force that swept out. It revealed a series of shocking visions that completely enveloped Zhuowen. Zhuowen's doppelganger carried Ghost Plume and retreated to a corner of the stone room. He did not interfere with Yi Shiwen's breakthrough. After all, this kind of breakthrough was usually difficult to interfere with. Otherwise, it would lead to unpredictable consequences. Xiao He, on the other hand, brought the blood-immortal sword and death-sacrifice sword to the doppelganger's side. She looked at Yi Shiwen's original body gravely. During the time when Zhuowen was absorbing the primordial dead flower and breaking through, Xiao He and the other two had gained a lot. The three of them had taken almost all the precious materials around the stone room for their own use. Although their gains could not be compared to Zhuowen's, they had still gained a lot. Boom, 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 boom. The visions of the way of heaven became more and more terrifying. They all crushed Yi Shiwen's original body. Yi Shiwen's original body stood up with a cold gaze. He performed the tyrannical Dao slaughtering technique move by move. His entire body turned into a terrifying weapon. Like a war machine, he destroyed the visions one after another. Finally, the moment Zhuowen destroyed the last manifestation, the surrounding heavens might dissipated, and Zhuowen's entire body was covered in wounds, blood gushing out from his wounds. However, Yi Shiwen's original body's aura was much more powerful than before. He was like a peerless god of war, standing there with an unimaginably terrifying aura flowing out of him. I've finally become the Lord of Profound Secrets. What power? My original body's power is much stronger than the average Lord of Profound Secrets. I'm probably comparable to an Lord. Ghost Plume Studio, and Ghost Plume Studio, who was in the Doppelguard. Lord of Profound Death. Lord was Lord Studio. Lord Master Studio, Lord Studio. Lord was Lord Studio, Lord Studio. Ghost Plume stared at Zhuowen in disbelief. He really couldn't understand how this guy could be so powerful when he was just a master of profound death. Ghost Plume's expression was very complicated. He couldn't help but think of the ordinary wooden bow Zhuowen had used to defeat him. He had a feeling that this ordinary wooden bow had an extraordinary origin. When Zhuowen's divine arrow pierced through his body, he had sensed that it was just an ordinary god of creation arrow. In terms of power, it was slightly weaker than the average god of creation weapon. However, such an ordinary divine arrow had been able to pierce through his defensive divine weapon and his body. He had almost died on the spot. That wooden bow on this guy's body, could it be that thing? Ghost Plume thought of something. His eyes were filled with shock, but more than that, confusion. This was because he had seen that thing tens of thousands of years ago. He silently compared it to Zhuowen's wooden bow and discovered that there was a huge difference between the two. Most importantly, the aura of Zhuowen's wooden bow was completely different from that thing. He wasn't too sure. After the main body broke through, it fused with the clone. Zhuowen's gaze fell on Ghost Plume. Ghost Plume felt his scalp go numb when he sensed Zhuowen's gaze. He actually didn't dare to meet Zhuowen's gaze. After experiencing Zhuowen's terror, Ghost Plume was both afraid and afraid of Zhun. Ghost Plume, I have something to ask of you. Zhuowen suddenly asked after a moment of silence. Ghost Plume lowered his head and said in a low voice, What is it? Do you know if there are any other ways to leave this underground secret room other than the 2 destroyed transportation arrays? Zhuowen lifted Ghost Plume's collar and looked straight at Ghost Plume. Ghost Plume's expression was very unnatural. He said in a low, muffled voice, You also know that this underground secret room is completely sealed. Other than the transportation array, there are basically no other ways to enter this underground secret room. Also, don't try in vain to think that you can leave the 10 Extremes Een Corps sect through the underground secret room. This is because the sect master has already set up a terrifying, inescapable net around the underground secret room. If you try to leave through the underground secret room, you will easily trigger those restrictions and alarm the entire sect. Zhuowen was silent. He still looked at Ghost Plume and grinned. Ghost Plume, I still can't trust you. I still trust myself more. Ghost Plume's eyes were filled with fear. He knew what Zhuowen was going to do. He hurriedly said, Brother Zhuowen, don't be rash. I just remembered that there seems to be another passage in this underground secret room. Zhuowen's lips curled into a playful smile. He quietly looked at Ghost Plume as if he was looking at a clown. Ghost Plume could also see the meaning in Zhuowen's eyes, and a trace of humiliation flashed across his eyes. Speak. Zhuowen casually threw Ghost Plume to the ground and said indifferently. Due to Gui Ling's heavy injuries and the fact that his cultivation had been sealed by Zhuowen, Gui Ling was basically no different from a mortal. He did not even have the strength to truss up a chicken. Zhuowen was not worried that Gui Ling would try anything funny. Ghost Plume sighed in his heart and said, When this underground secret room was first built, there was a secret passage that led directly to this underground secret room. Furthermore, that passage is very deep and has the power of the Earth's core. Once a cultivator enters the passage, their strength will be greatly reduced. It will take at least 3 days to get out of that passage. Zhuowen's eyes darkened. He lifted Ghost Plume and threw him to the ground. He said coldly, You didn't tell me such an important thing in advance? Were you secretly hoping that an expert from the sect would come through that passage to save you? Now, show me the entrance to that passage. Ghost Plume was dizzy from the fall, but he didn't dare to say anything. He hurriedly stood up and led the way for Zhuowen. Since the first elder did not enter the passageway, Zhuowen felt a lot more at ease. After setting up the layers of killing arrays, Zhuowen entered the tunnel and set up a monitoring array formation 1,000 meters into the tunnel. Once someone entered this 1,000 meters, it would immediately trigger the monitoring array. At that time, Zhuowen would immediately know who had entered the passage. Ghost Plume looked at the killing arrays set up by Zhuowen. The corners of his eyes twitched, and his expression darkened. He did not expect Zhuowen to be a divine array master at the pinnacle of the eternal grade. The killing arrays he set up were very powerful, and they were serial killing arrays. They were enough to seriously injure an ordinary creator. Even the creation master could be injured by the serial killing formation if he wasn't careful. After Zhuowen retreated from the passage, he received a message from Xiaohe. His eyes narrowed, revealing a trace of surprise. Ghost Plume, are you still hiding something from me? Zhuowen suddenly turned to Ghost Plume and asked murderously. Ghost Plume was taken aback. He quickly shook his head and said, I have nothing to hide from you. As long as I know, I will tell you. Zhuowen left with Ghost Plume and soon arrived at the stone chamber in the deepest part of the passage. At this moment, the thunder fire sword was stabbed into the altar in the center of the stone chamber, smashing the jade altar into pieces. Underneath the jade altar, there was actually an oval cave. On the other side of the cave, there was a blazing heat. Waves of heat rushed out, and red light filled the sky. The entire secret room seemed to have turned into the inside of a furnace. Xiaohe, who was originally plundering the ores in the stone chamber, took a fancy to the jade on the altar. He cut it into pieces with his sword. After taking the jade, he found that there was another world under the altar, so he informed Zhuowen with his divine sense. What is this place under the altar? You should know, right? Zhuan said coldly. Ghost Plume looked blankly at the cave under the altar. He shook his head and said, I really didn't know there was another world under the altar. I really didn't lie to you about this. I can swear to the heavenly Tao. Zhuan took a deep look at Ghost Plume. After confirming that the latter was not lying, he nodded and continued. You said that this underground secret chamber was built by Senki Yin, and his original intention was to study the dead flower? Ghost Plume was taken aback. He immediately shook his head and said, That's not the case. I once heard from the sect master that he built this underground secret chamber mainly for something. As for what it is, I don't know. Later, because the dead flower was too important, the sect master expanded and renovated this place, turning it into this underground secret chamber. Something? Zhuan narrowed his eyes. Follow me inside and take a look. Zhuan carried Ghost Plume and left his main body outside. After instructing Xiao Hei's 3 divine swords to guard the entrance, his doppelganger took Ghost Plume into the cave. Although Ghost Plume didn't seem to be lying, he still couldn't completely trust Ghost Plume. As soon as they entered the cave, Zhuan felt his body heat up. The temperature inside was simply too high. Zhuan discovered that there was a vast sea of magma at the bottom of the cave. From time to time, terrifying waves of fire would rise from the sea of magma and rise high into the air. They looked like terrifying magma dragons. Zhuan discovered that the magma in the depths of the cave wasn't ordinary magma. It contained extremely powerful heavenly Tao principles and possessed extraordinary power. Ghost Plume's face was red. His cultivation was sealed, so he couldn't withstand the heat. If it weren't for Zhuan's protection, Ghost Plume would have already been burned to ashes by the high temperature. Zhuan's expression remained the same. The magma in the depths of the cave was indeed unusual and even terrifying. However, Zhuan's Pangu sacred body had been integrated with the Zhurong venomous insect. This venomous insect was the source of Zhurong's power. It was something that gathered all the essence of fire. Not only was the fire energy harmless to the venomous insect, but it was also the best tonic. Zhuan noticed a huge stone pillar standing in the deepest part of the sea of magma. If it were an ordinary stone pillar, it would have melted long ago in such magma. However, this stone pillar was extremely sturdy. It stood in the sea of magma, and its surface was covered with complicated patterns. These patterns emitted a sparkling light and a heart-palpitating aura. At the top of the stone pillar, a scroll covered with black patterns was suspended. Chapter 2889. Yamagos Diagram. Bang bang bang. As Zhuan approached the stone pillar, the sea of lava below suddenly became violent and surged up, engulfing Zhuan in an attempt to pull him into the sea of lava. Zhuan snorted coldly and pointed with his right finger. The magma that was sweeping over was actually dispersed. Even more magma that was surging over fled in panic, as if it was very afraid of Zhuan. Ghost Plume was astonished, but Zhuan's gaze was calm. Just now, he had used the power of the Zhurong parasite to repel the waves of lava. This was not difficult for the Zhurong parasite. Zhuan arrived at the top of the stone pillar, but he was unable to approach the scroll at the center. There was a mysterious power that kept him 3 feet away. It's the power of this stone pillar that's sealing the scroll. Zhuan frowned slightly. He also noticed that Ghost Plume beside him had an expression of disbelief. You recognize this thing? Zhuan asked in a deep voice. Ghost Plume's gaze flickered, and he sighed lightly. I'm just guessing. This thing is most likely the Yamagos diagram. Yamagos diagram. Zhuan's pupils shrank. This Yamagos diagram was very famous in the host region. When he was in the Pill Array Immortal Alliance, Huan Taiping had mentioned it before. Zhuan was not a cultivator born and raised in the Xianmi Heavenly Region, so he had asked Huan Taiping many things about the Xianmi Heavenly Region. Thus, he knew many things about the Xianmi Heavenly Region like the back of his hand. He was not as ignorant as he was in the beginning. Rather than saying that the Yamagos diagram was famous, it was more accurate to say that the master of the Yamagos diagram was too famous. The master of the Yamagos diagram was the Yamagos Lord. This person was extremely talented, and he had only spent a few hundred years to reach the first step of Tao validation. In 1,000 years, he had stepped into the second step of Tao validation. After cultivating for 5,000 years, he had stepped into the third step of Tao validation. Generally, those who could reach the third step of Tao confirmation were all brilliant geniuses. However, after reaching the third step, each step was like ascending to the heavens. It was extremely difficult to advance. Even the most monstrous geniuses would have their advancement speed become very slow. However, Yama Ghost Lord seemed to have the help of a god. After entering the third step of the Tao confirmation realm, his cultivation speed increased instead of slowing down. It only took him 1,000 years to break through again and become a heaven-reaching master. After becoming a heaven-span lord, Yama Ghoul Lord's battle prowess was simply too shocking. Although he had only been an early heaven-span lord, he had been virtually invincible among his peers. He had even challenged mid-heaven-span lords and defeated all of them. Furthermore, the Yama Ghost Lord had a habit of challenging his opponents to a battle to the death. The winner would live and the loser would die. The loser's soul would be absorbed into the Yama Ghost diagram and become the Yama Ghost Lord's puppet Deathsworn. After becoming an early heaven-span lord, the Yama Ghost Lord's style of doing things began to become arrogant and unruly. Even if the loser begged for mercy, he would not hesitate to kill them. Because of this, he had offended too many forces. Many forces had once joined forces to encircle and annihilate the Yama Ghost Lord. However, the Yama Ghost Lord's escape methods were extremely clever and varied. Basically, these forces' encirclement plans had all failed. After the Yama Ghost Lord reached the late Heavenspan Lord stage, his strength was monstrous. Even peak Heavenspan Lords couldn't do anything to him. However, it was at this time that the Yama Ghost Lord's nature was exposed. He became even more unscrupulous in the Xianmi heavenly domain. He began to massacre cultivators and annihilate forces. In that era, the Yama Ghost Lord had destroyed countless Tao palaces and Taoist sections. In fact, the Yama Ghost Lord had single-handedly wiped out several Tao palaces. All the cultivators killed by the Yama Ghost Lord had their corporeal bodies destroyed and their souls collected into the Yama Ghost diagram. The Yama Ghost diagram grew more and more powerful. In the past, the Yama Ghost Lord had relied on the Yama Ghost diagram to annihilate a peak Heavenspan Lord, shocking the entire Xianmi heavenly domain. In the end, the Yama Ghost Lord's actions were simply too outrageous. He had even alarmed the original ruler of the Xianmi heavenly domain, Taoist Three Purities. Zhuan had heard from Huan Taiping about Taoist Three Purities. He knew that this so-called Taoist Three Purities was none other than the three domain rulers of the Huaxia heaven domain. Afterwards, after the three of them left the 8 celestial domains, they joined together and called themselves Laozi. He knew that Laozi was none other than the original ruler of the Xianmi heavenly domain, Taoist Three Purities. But of course, Zhuan also knew that the Three Purities had a very deep relationship with Pangu. They were formed from Pangu's primal divinity, and their status was on par with that of the 12 ancestral shamans. In the end, Taoist Three Purities had taken action. He had battled the Yama Ghost Lord for 10 days and 10 nights. In the end, he had slain the Yama Ghost Lord, and the Yama Ghost Lord's infamous weapon, the Yama Ghost diagram, had vanished without a trace. Zhuan had never imagined that the infamous Yama Ghost diagram would actually be here. It seems that the flesh and blood of the cultivators in that underground room were used to cultivate the flower of the dead, while their souls were probably absorbed by the Yama Ghost diagram to repair itself. Zhuan thought to himself. So the Yama Ghost diagram is actually here. It seems that your sect master found it and hid it here. Zhuan said. The ghost plume lowered his head, not saying a word. He truly had no idea that the Yama Ghost diagram was here. Senki Yin clearly hadn't told him about it. Zhuan didn't find this strange. If he had found the Yama Ghost diagram as well, he definitely wouldn't have revealed it either. Everyone knew that a man's wealth was his own ruin. Bang, bang, bang. Zhuan's right hand formed into a claw as he struck out with lightning speed. He tapped the seal on the surface of the stone pillar, and the power of primordial infinity filled the surface of his right hand. It had to be said that the seal on the stone pillar was extremely powerful. Zhuan had struck it for quite some time, but the seal didn't budge at all. It wasn't affected in the slightest. Zhuan stopped and frowned. He realized that the monitoring array he had set up in the tunnel had been destroyed. He knew that the experts of the Yin Corps sect were about to come down through the tunnel. Zhuan picked up the ghost plume and left the magma space. He quickly rushed toward the corridor in the middle of the underground room. Not long after, he arrived at the corridor in the middle of the secret room. He faced the narrow tunnel and threw the ghost plume aside. He said coldly, "Stand at the entrance of this tunnel and try your best to lure the people who are about to come out into my killing array. Let their guard down. If you do this well, I promise to spare your life." The ghost plume's eyes lit up, and he hurriedly promised Zhuan that he would do a good job. He stood at the entrance of the tunnel. As for Zhuan, he was in the next corridor, looking at the cave through a crack. His aura was completely retracted, and he had already prepared his Ho-E godly bow. He even took out his Ho-E godly arrow and knocked it on the bowstring. He knew that the cultivators who were able to come down were definitely experts at the level of the elders of the 10 Ultimate Yin Corps sect. Moreover, they were definitely ranked at the top of the list. He had to use his full strength to kill the experts who came down in one blow. This way, he could avoid an unnecessary bitter battle. Thump, thump, thump. Chapter 2890. Design dang dang dang. The sound of footsteps could be heard as 3 figures appeared at the entrance of the cave. The person in the lead was an old man in a loose robe. His aura was very powerful, like the vast starry sky. He was the 4th elder of the Yin Corps sect, Ba Jingwei. The 2 old men behind Ba Jingwei were naturally the 10th elder, Gu Hongkai, and the 8th elder, Mao Xinho. Ba Jingwei's gaze was very cautious. Just now, when he was about a kilometer away from the exit, he had discovered a monitoring array formation. They knew that the person who had placed this monitoring array formation was very likely Zhuan. However, the moment Ba Jingwei and the other 2 walked to the exit, they saw Gui Ling, who was already standing at the exit. The 3 of them revealed a surprised expression. "Martial nephew Ghost Plume?" Ba Jingwei asked uncertainly. Ghost Plume nodded and sighed softly. "3 elders, you're finally here." "Martial nephew Ghost Plume is fine. That's great." "Yes, I thought that something might have happened to Martial nephew Ghost Plume when we lost contact, but it turns out that he's fine." The 10th elder, Gu Hongkai, and the 8th elder, Mao Xinho, relaxed. They did not suspect anything and walked straight towards Ghost Plume. Ba Jingwei stopped the 2 of them. Gu Hongkai and Mao Xinho looked at Ba Jingwei in confusion. "Be careful." Ba Jingwei whispered to the 2, then looked at Ghost Plume and said, "Martial nephew Ghost Plume, you seem to be seriously injured, and your aura is very weak. What's going on? Also, where is Zhuan now?" Ghost Plume did not mind Ba Jingwei's vigilance and sighed softly. "I entered this underground secret room before you all and followed you all the way until I found Zhuan. This kid is very cunning. Not only did he destroy the first teleportation formation, he even found the location of the second teleportation formation and destroyed it as well. Fortunately, I came early. Otherwise, I'm afraid I would have to enter this place through this passage like you all. However, that Zhuan is not simple. He has many trump cards. I fought with him for a long time, and in the end, I used all my skills and finally killed him. However, I was also seriously injured and ended up in this state." Ghost Plume smiled helplessly. His tone was sincere, and the first impression he gave was that he was telling the truth. Gu Hongkai and Mao Xinho did not suspect anything, but Ba Jingwei was very cautious. He said in a deep voice, "Martial nephew Ghost Plume, I found a monitoring array in the passage." "Martial nephew, are you telling me that you set it up?" As soon as Ba Jingwei said this, Gu Hongkai and Mao Xinho also felt that something was wrong. They knew that Ghost Plume knew about the existence of this passage, but Ghost Plume had no reason to set up a monitoring array in the passage. After all, they were friends with Ghost Plume, not enemies. There was no need to set up a monitoring array in the passage. Ghost Plume did not panic and said with a smile, "That monitoring array was naturally not set up by me. It was set up by Zhuan. This kid's spirit is abnormally powerful. He discovered this passageway in advance and is also very vigilant. He set up a monitoring formation here in advance, just in case. If Elder Ba hadn't mentioned it, I wouldn't have known that there was a monitoring formation in this passageway." Ba Jingwei took a deep look at Ghost Plume and frowned. He felt that something was wrong, but Ghost Plume did not look like Zhuan in disguise and was indeed the real deal. "Martial nephew Ghost Plume, can you prove that you really killed Zhuan?" Ba Jingwei suddenly asked. Ghost Plume's face suddenly became gloomy and he quickly said, "Elder Ba, are you doubting me? If you think that what I said is false, then you can choose not to believe me. You can even leave. When I recover, I will naturally return with Zhuo Wen's corpse. There is no need for Elder Ba and the others to trouble you." "Martial nephew Ghost Plume, don't misunderstand. Elder Ba is just being careful. We came down to help you, so don't think too much about it," Gu Hongkai and Mao Xinho hurriedly explained. They had heard of Ghost Plume's identity in the sect and knew why sect Master Senki Yin took special care of Ghost Plume. Therefore, although they were elders, they did not dare to offend Ghost Plume too much. "After all, we are all from the same sect, so I don't want to go too far. If the three elders don't believe me, you can follow me to the stone room in the depths. Zhuowen's body is there," Ghost Plume said somewhat angrily. Ba Jingwei's eyes flickered. When he thought of the three elders present, no matter how powerful Zhuan was, it was impossible for him to be a match for them, so he let down his guard and cupped his fists to Ghost Plume and said, "Martial nephew Ghost Plume, please take us to the stone room." Ghost Plume nodded, waved his hand, and left the exit. Ba Jingwei and the other two followed behind Guiling. However, as soon as they took a few steps, their expressions changed at the same time. This was because they felt a vast pressure sweeping up from all around them. It was as if it wanted to crush them to the ground. A terrifying killing intent raged like a wave, surging violently, causing all the hair on their bodies to stand on end. Killing array? Ba Jingwei quickly realized that something was wrong. The energy in his body surged as he coldly looked at Ghost Plume, who had left the range of the killing array. "Martial nephew Ghost Plume, you tricked us?" Ba Jingwei asked in a deep voice. Gu Hongkai and Mao Xinho also realized that something was wrong. They looked at Ghost Plume's back in puzzlement, unable to think of a reason for Ghost Plume to do this. Ghost Plume didn't turn his head, but continued to walk forward. Chapter 2891. Winner takes all Zhuowen? Ghost Plume? Ba Jingwei's pupils shrank as he stared in disbelief at Ghost Plume, who was standing behind Zhuan. He had never imagined that Ghost Plume would actually side with Zhuan. Was this a joke? One of the 5 monstrous geniuses, the number 1 genius of the 10 Absolutes Yin Corps sect, had actually sided with Zhuowen. Moreover, he had even helped the enemy deal with their own elder. Ba Jingwei felt as if he had just eaten shit. But soon, Ba Jingwei realized that now was not the time to be angry. The blood-stained arrow in Zhuowen's hand was simply too terrifying. The killing intent it exuded made Ba Jingwei feel as if he was facing the Grim Reaper. "This is not good, it's the Ho-E Divine Bow. Let's break the array." Ba Jingwei had once surrounded Yuxian with other experts, and his goal was to obtain the Ho-E Divine Bow. He had felt the terrifying killing intent of the Ho-E Divine Bow. Although the wooden bow in Zhuowen's hand had changed greatly, Ba Jingwei could not forget the terrifying killing intent it exuded. Gu Hongkai and Mao Xinho were both horrified as they desperately tried to break the array. They had also heard of the terrifying power of the Ho-E Divine Bow. Now that they felt the terrifying killing intent, the only thought in their minds was to run for their lives. They did not dare to stay here for long. Boom! The killing array was instantly shattered by the 3 of them. However, their expressions soon turned ugly as they discovered that this was a serial killing array. When they shattered one of the killing arrays, another terrifying killing array was triggered, trapping them inside. Zhuo Wen's gaze was indifferent as he pulled the bowstring back to half of the curve. His killing intent actually increased by a few dozen times. With a whoosh, the blood-stained arrow left the bowstring. It was so fast that it turned into a streak of bloody light in the air. The arrow's power was terrifying. Wherever it passed, space-time collapsed, revealing the pitch-black space beneath. At this moment, Ba Jingwei and the other two had already destroyed the last killing array, and the blood-stained arrows had already arrived in front of them. Gu Hongkai and Mao Xinhou immediately summoned their divine artifacts and unleashed their full power to block the attack. Gu Hongkai then turned to Ba Jingwei and said, "Elder Ba, we will help you block this arrow. You go and capture that bastard Juan. Don't let him off so easily." However, as soon as Gu Hong said that, he cried out miserably. The god artifact before him shattered, and a sliver of bloody light pierced through his forehead. Blood splattered as he heavily fell to the ground, dead. After Gu Hongkai was pierced by the blood-stained arrow, Mao Xinhou's body trembled and he couldn't help but retreat. However, the arrow seemed to have a mind of its own as it flew towards Mao Xinhou. Mao Xinhou was slightly more powerful than Gu Hongkai, and he was a late-stage god of creation. However, he was still unable to block the blood-stained arrows. The instant Mao Xinhou came into contact with the arrows, he was instantly pierced through by the terrifying arrows. His life force was extinguished, and he followed in Gu Hongcai's footsteps. In just 2 breaths of time, Gu Hongkai and Mao Xinhou had both died to the Hou-Yi divine arrow. Ba Jingwei's heart was filled with fear. He discovered that the Hou-Yi divine bow in Zhuowen's hands was even more terrifying than when it had been in Yu Xian's hands. Ba Jingwei knew that this wasn't because the Hou-Yi divine bow had become stronger. Instead, it was because the blood-stained arrows shot out from Zhuowen's hands were no ordinary arrows. With the enhancement of the Hou-Yi divine bow, they were far more powerful than ordinary arrows. Ba Jingwei continuously retreated. His divine artifact was a pair of round wheels that radiated a peerless golden light and flashed with terrifying brilliance. Although Ba Jingwei's wheels weren't creation-grade divine artifacts, they were infinitely close to being creation-grade divine artifacts. Coupled with Ba Jingwei's early-stage god of creation cultivation base, the power he could unleash was extremely terrifying. At this moment, Ba Jingwei was constantly retreating. His hands were like lightning as he brandished the wheels. Intense golden light erupted from them, and it was as if he were holding a scorching sun in each hand. Ba Jingwei continued to bombard the blood-colored arrows in front of him, causing the aftershocks to explode. However, he soon discovered that each of his attacks were pierced through by the blood-colored arrows. The blood-colored arrows were like a hot knife through butter, and Ba Jingwei's attacks were like paper tigers in front of them. Ba Jingwei roared angrily as he retreated to the end of the corridor. He began to burn his essence blood and unleashed all the potential in his body. The wheels in his hands were like exploding stars. The golden light was so terrifying that the entire underground chamber began to tremble violently. Fortunately, this underground chamber was personally arranged by Sun Qin, and the surface of the underground chamber was covered with many powerful spirit arrays. Otherwise, it would not have been able to withstand the power that Ba Jingwei had unleashed at this moment. Bang, bang, bang. Ba Jingwei repeatedly bombarded the blood-stained arrows in front of him. Every time he struck, he would vomit blood and retreat a step. He was in a very sorry state, but he wasn't completely killed by the blood-stained arrows. Zhuan stared at Ba Jingwei in shock. His complexion didn't look too good. It seemed that the strength of a creation-grade divine artifact was somewhat beyond his expectations. Although Ba Jingwei was only an early-stage creation-grade divine artifact, he was many times stronger than Gu Hongkai and Mao Xinhou. Yet, he was able to forcibly resist the Hou-Yi divine arrows. This was the first time that Zhuan had failed to shoot a Hou-Yi divine arrow. Bang! Ba Jingwei roared towards the sky. A terrifying bloody mist erupted from his body, and the wheels in his hands erupted with golden light that reached a terrifying level. Kacha! Ba Jingwei's wheels shattered into powder. A terrifying power spread out, causing the entire underground chamber to shake violently once more. The blood-stained arrows were knocked several inches off course by Ba Jingwei's power, piercing through Ba Jingwei's shoulder blades and stabbing into the rock wall behind him. Plop! Ba Jingwei spat out a mouthful of blood and fell to his knees. His face was so pale that he didn't look like a living person. Zhuan slowly walked up to Ba Jingwei. Looking at the latter's twitching appearance and his increasingly weak aura, he knew that Ba Jingwei's life was about to come to an end. He was hanging on by a single breath. Given Ba Jingwei's current state, he didn't have the slightest bit of fighting power to speak of. He posed no threat to Zhuan. Ba Jingwei raised his head with difficulty and stared at Zhuan, his eyes filled with hatred. He could clearly sense that his life force was constantly fading away. He knew that he didn't have much time left. He hated. Originally, he had a bright future ahead of him, and he had come here full of ambition. He had wanted to capture Zhuan and claim credit from the Grand Elder. But suddenly, he had been deceived as soon as he emerged from the passageway. Then he had been ambushed by Zhuan. Now that he was on the verge of death, he couldn't accept it. Ba Jingwei, the winner takes all. Don't look at me like that. Now that you've lost, you should be prepared to die, Zhuan said indifferently. Chapter 2892. You're carrying the Hou-Yi Divine Bow on your back, aren't you? What's your relationship with Yu Exit? Ba Jingwei asked weakly. It seems that you've recognized me. I have nothing to do with Senior Yu Xian. I just got the Hou-Yi Godly Bow by accident and promised Senior Yu Xian that I would help him fulfill his last wish, Zhuan said calmly. What last wish? Ba Jingwei asked with difficulty. Help him kill 3 enemies, and you are one of the 3 people he must kill. Ba Jingwei, this is your karma. After saying that, Zhuan pointed his right sword finger at Ba Jingwei's forehead. A terrifying energy burst out, and Ba Jingwei's divine soul was completely annihilated by Zhuan. Ba Jingwei stared fixedly at Zhuan. Finally, he fell to the ground, his body twitching as he lost all signs of life. Ghost Plume, who was standing behind Zhuan, looked at the dead Ba Jingwei with a complicated expression. To be honest, Ba Jingwei's death had a lot to do with him. If he hadn't helped the evildoer, Ba Jingwei wouldn't have died so miserably. After killing Ba Jingwei, Zhuan collected the spiritual rings of the 3 elders, including Ba Jingwei, and sent out 3 divine flames, burning the 3 elders' corpses to ashes. After doing this, Zhuan put away the Hou-Yi Godly Arrow, took out an ordinary arrow from the macro world, and knocked it on the bowstring of the Hou-Yi Godly Bow. Then, he easily pulled the bowstring to 1/2. After Zhuan's Pangu sacred body had reached the peak of the 5 stars, his strength had increased tremendously. Moreover, this was just an ordinary arrow, so it wasn't difficult for him to pull the bowstring to 1/2. However, Zhuan still felt that it wasn't enough. He roared loudly, and suddenly pulled the bowstring to 2/3 of the way. A terrifying killing intent erupted like an erupting volcano. It was very terrifying, and the momentum was vast and mighty. Blood seeped out from the corner of Zhuowen's mouth. A terrifying bloody mist erupted from his arms. Clearly, pulling the bowstring of Hou-Yi to 2/3 of its length was his limit. Zhuan, what are you? Ghost Plume looked at Zhuowen's actions and asked in shock. Didn't you say it before? The Great Elder had to use his own strength to support the passage so that it wouldn't collapse. In other words, the Grand Elder should be at the entrance of the passageway, Zhuan said indifferently. Ghost Plume thought of something and looked at Zhuan in disbelief. You want to destroy this passage? Not only that. After Zhuan finished speaking, he loosened his right hand, and the arrow shot out with a whoosh. Its speed was as fast as lightning, and it instantly disappeared on the spot. The air resounded with continuous explosive sounds. The arrow entered the passageway, and as if it had a mind of its own, it flew up along the passageway with monstrous killing intent. At the entrance of the passageway, the Great Elder, Gao Yanghong, formed a seal with his hands. A white brilliance surged out from his hands and entered the passageway. Gao Yanghong's expression was calm. He had just felt the tremors coming from the depths of the passageway. He knew that Ba Jingwei and the others had already met Zhuowen and were fighting. However, the tremors only lasted for a while before it stopped. He knew that Ba Jingwei had already dealt with Zhuowen. Gao Yanghong had never placed Zhuowen in his eyes. Perhaps Zhuowen was a genius among the younger generation, but in his eyes, Zhuowen was just an ant. This Zhuowen is an immortal master of the Pill Array Immortal Alliance, and he died in my 10 Extremities In Corpse sect. It seems that I have to fabricate an explanation. Otherwise, it will be difficult to explain to the Pill Array Immortal Alliance. It would be good if the sect master was still in the sect. With the sect master's prestige and his cooperation with Ji Wuming shouldn't be so greedy. Gao Yanghong muttered to himself and began to consider the consequences of killing Zhuan. If Zhuan was an ordinary cultivator, he naturally wouldn't care. However, Zhuan was an immortal master of the Pill Array Immortal Alliance, which made things a little tricky. Just as Gao Yanghong was thinking about this, he seemed to sense a terrifying killing intent approaching him at an extremely fast speed. Gao Yanghong frowned, and his expression changed slightly. He immediately withdrew his hands and retreated. The instant he retreated, the killing intent was already very close to him. Gao Yanghong was finally able to clearly see that the source of the terrifying killing intent was actually an arrow. The arrow was like a black lightning bolt, and it instantly arrived in front of him. It was rudely aimed at his vitals. Gao Yanghong's eyes were gloomy. He made a move with both hands, and a powerful qi burst out. It tore through the space and quickly slapped the arrow. Bang, bang, bang. Suddenly, there were continuous explosions in the space. Gao Yanghong groaned and kept retreating. He took 9 steps back in a row. His eyes were filled with anger. He roared, and the qi in his hands reached an extremely terrifying level. He quickly blasted it out, and it hit the middle of the arrow at an incredible angle. Finally, he used this skillful qi to smash the arrow into the ground. Boom! The arrow was stuck in the ground, and the whole ground emitted a dull sound. It produced a terrifying vibration, and countless cracks spread out. It was as if the earth was ushering in the end of the world. Gao Yanghong's breathing was disordered, and his eyes were gloomy. His hands were bleeding, and there were terrifying injuries. The arrow just now had caused him a lot of damage. However, what made Gao Yanghong even more furious was that the entrance to the passage ahead had collapsed. The impact of this collapse was a chain reaction. All the passages below had collapsed, and Gao Yanghong could feel the tremors from the collapse of the passage under his feet. He knew that the collapse of the passage meant that the last passage to the underground secret room was also abandoned. With Gao Yanghong's strength, it was not difficult for him to dig 3 feet into the ground and enter the secret room. But the problem was that the underground chamber was surrounded by terrifying spirit arrays and restrictions that Sun Qin had personally set up in the past. If he were to dig 3 feet into the underground chamber, he would likely be restrained by those terrifying spirit arrays and restrictions. Gao Yanghong had seen the spirit formations that Senki Yin had set up around the secret room. He knew how terrifying those spirit formations were. If he wanted to forcefully break through those spirit formations, he would have to pay a great price. He might even be seriously injured. Therefore, unless he had no other choice, Gao Yanghong did not plan to force his way into the secret room. I have to inform the sect master first. All the entrances to the secret room have been sealed. I can't go in, and Zhuan can't come out. Gao Yanghong was not worried that Zhuan would be able to escape. No matter how powerful Zhuan was, he would not be able to break through the spirit formations around the secret room. Once the spirit formations were triggered, Gao Yanghong would immediately know. Then he would dig 3 feet into the ground to hunt down Zhuan. Chapter 2893. Sealing Array. Zhuan looked at the tunnel exit that had completely collapsed, and his heart that had been hanging in the air finally settled down. However, Zhuan was not completely at ease. He formed a seal with both hands and set up many trap and kill arrays at the exit of the tunnel. Only then did he stop. Zhuan knew that the last tunnel had been sealed. If the experts of the 10 Ultimate In Corpse sect wanted to enter the secret underground chamber, they would have to force their way in from the outside. They would have to break through the layers of restriction arrays that Senki Yin had set up. Only then would they have a chance of entering the secret underground chamber. In the entire 10 Ultimate In Corpse sect, other than Senki Yin, there was no other cultivator who could break through the terrifying restriction arrays and enter the secret underground chamber unscathed. Even the great elder of the 10 Ultimate In Corpse sect, Gao Yanghong, could not do so. "You promised to let me live. Ghost Plume suddenly spoke when he saw that Zhuan had destroyed the last tunnel. He was afraid that Zhuan would kill him. After all, he was no longer of any use to Zhuan. Zhuan looked at Ghost Plume indifferently and guessed what Ghost Plume was thinking. He said indifferently, "Don't worry, I won't go back on my word. I will let you live, but not now. When the right time comes, I will let you go." After he finished speaking, Yun put Ghost Plume into his great world and returned to the stone chamber in the deepest part of the cave. At this moment, in the cave below the altar, Xiao He was commanding the Blood Immortal Sword and the Sacrificial Death Sword to guard the entrance. "Xiao He, you guys can also enter this sovereign's great world. Leave the job of checking to this sovereign," Zhuan said. Xiao He nodded. After telling them to be careful, she took the Blood Immortal Sword and the Sacrificial Death Sword into the macro world. The macro world was huge. Xiao He had carved out a large piece of land for his private cultivation cave. Blood Immortal Sword and Sacrificial Sword were Xiao He's loyal followers. They basically lived in Xiao He's private cave. Zhuan had once entered Xiao He's private cave abode and found all kinds of precious materials and ores that were rarely seen in the outside world. He knew that Xiao He must have gotten a lot of good stuff behind his back. Furthermore, the sword catacomb that they had obtained previously was not an ordinary one. In addition to the various precious ores and materials that they had obtained in this underground secret room, Zhuan knew that Xiao He's level would rise very quickly in the near future. However, his Pangu sacred body was, after all, integrated with the power of the Zhurong poisonous insect. Naturally, he could completely withstand the high temperature of the magma. Zhuan went to the bottom of the magma and found that the stone pillar was inserted in the soil at the bottom of the magma. On the soil, there was a half-meter wide formation. Zhuan narrowed his eyes. He knew that this was the formation eye of the seal restriction. Furthermore, he also discovered that the energy of the lines on the surface of the stone pillar was transmitted from the eye of the formation, thus forming such a vast sealing array. A creation-level seal formation. Zhuowen's expression turned ugly when he saw the true state of the array core. His current level of formation Dao was at most at the peak of the eternal level. It was not a problem for him to break a creation-level formation by relying on Hongmeng Wuji. However, it was a little difficult for him to break a creation-level formation. Or rather, with his current level, it was impossible for him to break a creation-level formation. However, Yun was not discouraged. Instead, he took out the True Alchemy Array record and flipped through it. He remembered that in the sealing chapter of the True Alchemy Array record, there was a secret method that could forcibly destroy the formation eye of the seal formation. However, this secret method had a very strong side effect. It needed to absorb more than 70% of the essence Qi in the caster's body. There was a warning in the True Alchemy Array record that this secret method must not be used casually. This was because when most spellcasters used this arcane technique, after breaking the powerful sealing circle, they would die of exhaustion due to the loss of too much essence. It could be said that using this secret method was equivalent to using one's life to break the formation. Zhuan pondered for a moment and decided to use this secret method. The Yamagos diagram was a sky-level divine weapon. It should be known that there were only a few divine weapons of this level in the entire Xianmi heavenly domain. Chapter 2894. Breaking the formation. If he could obtain the Yamagos diagram, Yun would undoubtedly have another trump card that was more powerful than Ho Yi's divine arrow. Since he had found such a thing, how could he let it go? Moreover, Zhuowen's Pangu sacred body was full of essence energy, which was incomparable to that of ordinary cultivators. In addition, he had many dead flowers with him. The essence energy of these flowers was enough to give him the confidence to use such a terrifying secret method. Thinking of this, Zhuan did not hesitate and began to comprehend the secret method in the sealing chapter of the True Alchemy Array record. After Zhuowen completely comprehended the secret method, he came in front of the sealing formation. He formed a complicated seal with both hands and began to use the secret method. In an instant, Yun felt as if the essence energy in his body had been emptied. The essence energy broke out of his body and turned into bright red blood energy, which turned into complicated blood-red runes between Zhuowen's hands. The blood-red runes were as dense as ants. They flew out of Zhuowen's hands and landed on the formation in front of him. Zhuowen could clearly feel that the moment the blood-red runes landed on the surface of the formation, the seemingly indestructible sealing formation began to tremble. Seeing that the secret method was effective against the sealing formation, Zhuowen became excited and worked even harder to break the formation. However, at the same time, he also found that the essence energy in his body was rapidly flowing away and being transformed into the power of the blood-red runes. The loss of essence energy was too fast. Even though Zhuowen had the Pangu's sacred body, he could not bear it. However, Zhuowen was not in a hurry. He took out the dead flowers that he had collected from the outside world and began to absorb the essence energy in them to make up for the loss of essence energy in his body. It had to be said that the dead flowers were indeed very useful. The surging essence energy contained in them completely made up for the essence energy that Zhuowen had lost. With the supply of essence energy from the dead flowers, Zhuowen did not have too many scruples when using the secret method. Time passed by. After about half a day, the surface of the sealing formation at the bottom of the stone pillar finally began to crack. The cracks continued to spread, and finally, the array formation collapsed. The moment the formation collapsed, the shining lines on the surface of the stone pillar in the magma instantly dimmed, turning it into a very ordinary stone pillar. Zhuowen let out a sigh of relief. Looking at the dead man flower that was about to be used up by him, he couldn't help but smile bitterly. It had to be said that the side effects of the secret technique were too great. He had actually used up all the dead man flowers he had on him. One had to know that there were over 1,000 dead man flowers that Zhuowen had plundered from the stone room. Now, almost all of them had been used up. It could be seen that this secret technique had consumed a lot of Zhuowen's essence. Zhuowen also knew that if he hadn't obtained these dead man flowers, using this secret technique would be courting death. After jumping out of the magma, Zhuowen returned to the top of the stone pillar. The sealing barrier at the top of the stone pillar had collapsed at this moment, and the Yama's ghost diagram floated quietly in the air. Billowing black chi lingered around the Yama's ghost diagram, revealing a mysterious aura. Boy, be careful. I have a hunch that this Yama's ghost diagram is very terrifying. Although I can feel the dilapidated aura from it and guess that this Yama's ghost diagram must be seriously damaged, a starving camel is still bigger than a horse. After all, this thing used to be a heaven-grade divine artifact. Its power is terrifying. Xiao He came out of the outside world and landed beside Zhuowen, looking at the Yama's ghost diagram in front of them with dread. Xiao He was an artifact cultivator. Relying on her own cultivation to reach the eternal grade divine artifact, she was very sensitive to the aura of high-grade divine artifacts. Since Xiao He was so cautious, Zhuowen naturally would not take it lightly. "I'll be careful," Zhuowen said, then walked up to the Yama's ghost diagram. After hesitating for a moment, he reached out with his right hand, intending to put it into his bag. However, the moment Zhuowen's right hand touched the Yama's ghost diagram, the black chi on the surface of the Yama's ghost diagram suddenly gushed out, drowning Zhuowen's entire figure in the black chi. Xiao He, who was observing from a distance, paled and immediately rushed in. But soon, with a muffled groan, he was swept away by the black chi and flew out in an extremely sorry state. Xiao He's face did not look too good. He rushed in several times, but was washed away by the terrifying energy of the black chi. In the end, the brilliance on the surface of the Thunderfire sword almost dimmed, and its strength was greatly reduced. Xiao He's eyes were filled with unwillingness, but there was nothing he could do. Seeing the black chi in front of him transform into a demonic palm that quickly swept over, trying to catch Xiao He and tear him apart, Xiao He let out an unwilling roar and left this place. He wanted to return to the cave to discuss with his main body. He knew that his main body had a close connection with his doppelganger, so his main body would know immediately if something happened to his doppelganger. Zhuowen looked at the pitch-black space around him, and his face was somewhat ugly. He was probably in the inner space of the Yama's ghost diagram, but he did not know why the Yama's ghost diagram wanted to suck him in. Tap, tap, tap. The sound of water dripping came from the front, And then Juan saw a pair of huge eyes appear in the darkness in front of him. The eyes were emitting a purple flame, and they were faintly shining. It was very strange. Artifact spirit? Juan asked with uncertainty. Junior, thank you for unlocking the seal of the Yama's ghost diagram. I have been trapped here for too long, and I can't even remember who I am. However, I still want to thank you for freeing me. In order to repay you, you will be my food, merge into my body, and climb to the peak with me to enjoy supreme glory. The huge monster in the darkness had a sharp voice, and it sneered coldly. It opened its bloody mouth and swallowed Juan. Juan could not move at all, and could only watch as he was swallowed by the huge monster. But soon, the Pango banner in his divine soul emitted a blazing light, and suddenly swept out. Then, Juan heard a scream, and the darkness in front of him was completely dispelled. His vision also opened up a lot, and he finally saw the real face of the huge monster in front of him. It was a strange beast with a human head and a tiger's body. Its whole body was filled with black chi, and its eyes were burning with purple flames, looking very strange. This is the Pango banner? How can a human like you have such a thing? Impossible. When the strange beast saw the Pango banner that was suppressing him, it looked very flustered and helpless, as if it had lost its soul. What are you? Are you the artifact spirit of the Yama's ghost diagram? Juan asked coldly. The moment he was swallowed by the strange beast, cold sweat broke out all over his body, and he felt a life-and-death crisis. If it were not for the Pango banner, he would have been a corpse by now. I am the artifact spirit of the Yama's ghost diagram. Sir, I didn't mean to offend you just now. I won't dare to do it again next time. Let me go. The strange beast begged for mercy. Chapter 2895. The remnant consciousness of the Yama Ghost Lord. Were you trying to take over my body just now? How can an artifact spirit like you take over a cultivator's body? Jun formed a lightning whip with his divine power and lashed it at the strange beast, causing it to grimace in pain. Jun knew that his soul had left his body and was forcefully pulled out of his body by the strange beast into the Yama ghost portrait. The strange beast wanted to devour his soul just now, so it was obvious that it wanted to take over his body. Generally speaking, artifact spirits were unable to take over a cultivator's body. Otherwise, everything would be a mess. However, this strange beast wanted to take over his body, so it was obvious that this strange beast was not a real artifact spirit. Juan suspected that this strange beast might be a cultivator's soul in disguise. Sure enough, when Juan said this, the strange beast frowned and fell into silence. I don't have the patience to question you, and I'm in a hurry. Since you don't want to tell me, I have my own ways to find out. Juan's eyes were cold as he stepped to the side of the strange beast. His right hand was like lightning as he grabbed the strange beast's head, and a powerful spiritual energy surged out. The strange beast felt Juan's killing intent and hurriedly opened its mouth, indicating that it was willing to tell the truth. Too late. Juan did not hesitate to destroy the strange beast. At the same time, he collected all the memory fragments in the strange beast, wanting to check its complete memories. Under the suppression of the Pango banner, this strange beast was basically powerless. That was why Juan was able to kill it so easily. After checking the strange beast's memories, Juan's eyes revealed a look of understanding. He finally knew the strange beast's identity. So it's a remnant consciousness of the Yama Ghost Lord. No wonder when I approached the Yama Ghost portrait, it wanted to take over my body so anxiously. Juan's eyes narrowed. He felt lucky that he had the Pango banner on him. Otherwise, he would have been successfully taken over by the remnant consciousness of the Yama Ghost Lord. Juan knew very well that once the Yama Ghost Lord successfully possessed his body, he would definitely be able to make a comeback with his talent. And he, Juan, would become his sacrificial lamb. But soon, Juan's heart became extremely hot. He had obtained the memories of the Yama Ghost Lord, which meant that he knew the trick to controlling the Yama Ghost portrait. After all, this thing was created by the Yama Ghost Lord. No one knew the Yama Ghost portrait better than the Yama Ghost Lord. Let's leave this Yama demon diagram first. With a thought, Zhuan began to control the Yama Ghost diagram according to the memories of the Yama Ghost Lord. To his surprise, the Yama Ghost diagram really sent his soul out. At this moment, the black smoke outside the stone pillar dissipated. Zhuan stood stiffly in front of the Yama demon portrait with his eyes slightly closed. But soon, Zhuan opened his eyes. He looked at the Yama demon portrait in front of him and felt extremely hot. After knowing the memories of the Yama Ghost Lord's remnant consciousness, he knew very well how terrifying the power of the Yama demon portrait was. Although the Yama demon portrait was damaged now, it had recovered a lot over the years and had begun to have the power of a divine artifact. What surprised Zhuan even more was that the Yama Ghost Lord's remnant consciousness had been trapped here for a long time and had been looking for a way to leave this place. Over the years, the Yama Ghost Lord's remnant consciousness had left this secret space more than once to study the array formation outside and finally found a way to break it. The Yama Ghost Lord was only waiting to be able to take over the body of a cultivator and leave this place at any time. In the future, he would be able to live freely. Unfortunately, the Yama Ghost Lord's remnant consciousness had made all of this a wedding dress for Zhuan. After leaving the sea of lava and returning to the entrance of the cave, Xiao He and his original body hurriedly came to greet him. "Kid, are you all right?" Xiao He asked worriedly. Zhuan smiled and waved his hand, saying, "I'm fine. I'll take you out of here now." Xiao He looked at Zhuan strangely and said, "Kid, didn't you destroy all the passages in this underground secret space? Do you have any other way to leave this place? Just follow me." Zhuan merged his original body and doppelganger into one and put Xiao He into his macro world. Then he re-entered the sea of lava. He came to the bottom of the stone pillar and smashed it to dust with a punch. Then, a black tunnel appeared under the stone pillar. This black tunnel was very mysterious. The lava was on top of this black tunnel, but the lava did not flow into this black tunnel. It was as if there was a transparent barrier at the entrance of the black tunnel that separated the lava. However, Zhuan knew that there were no restrictions at the entrance of this black tunnel. He entered the black tunnel and continued forward. This black tunnel was opened up by the Yama Ghost Lord's remnant consciousness over the years. It led to the core of the formation outside the underground secret space. After a while, Zhuan walked out of the black tunnel and left the underground secret space. What greeted him was a series of formations that emitted flowing light. Zhuan followed the memories of the Yama Ghost Lord's remnant consciousness and arrived in front of one of the formations. He knew that this was the weakest part of all the formations. It was also the core of the formation. As long as he could break this core, he would be able to leave this place. Yama Ghost Lord was indeed a genius. Although he had only left behind a remnant consciousness, he still found a way to break this core. Zhuan only took half an hour to break the core of the formation. However, Zhuan did not destroy the entire formation. He only opened up a hole that was about the size of a person at the core of the formation and quietly left this place. With his ability, he could naturally destroy the entire formation. However, he did not dare to do so because it would cause too much of a commotion. It would attract the attention of the experts in the sect. At that time, the gains would not make up for the losses. After all, Zhuan had not left the territory of the Ten Extremities Een Corpse sect. If the experts of the Ten Extremities Een Corpse sect found him now, it would be very difficult for him to leave the territory of the Ten Extremities Een Corpse sect. After walking out of the formation, Zhuan took out the space-time roulette and began to travel through the underground secret space. Zhuan could not tell the direction at the moment, so he just randomly chose a direction and quietly moved forward. Once he was completely out of the territory of the Ten Extremities Een Corpse sect, he would leave the underground secret space and return to the Pill Array Immortal Alliance to tell Ji Wuming about the dead man flower. While Zhuan was escaping through the underground secret space, the sect leader of the Ten Extremities Een Corpse sect, Senki Een, returned, causing a huge uproar in the sect. Inside the sect leader's cave, the great elder Gao Yanghong stood respectfully to the side. In front of him stood a straight figure. This was a middle-aged man who looked to be in his 40s. However, he was as thin as a match. Even the loose robe he wore could not hide his emaciated figure. Although the middle-aged man looked thin and weak, his eyes exuded a lofty majesty. It was obvious that he had been in a high position for a long time. This man was the sect leader of the 10 Extremities In Corps sect, Senki In. It was said that his strength was extremely terrifying. In the host region, he was one of the top experts. At this moment, Senki In was standing beside a small pond in the sect's cave. His eyes were gloomy, and his skinny arms were exposed. He was constantly forming hand seals. Soon, the transportation formation in the small pond emitted a milky white light. "Yang Hong, come with me. I want to see what kind of person Zhuoan is." He actually dared to break into my secret underground chamber, kill my sect's cultivators, and even destroy the passage leading to the secret underground chamber. Senki In flew to the top of the formation and called Gao Yanghong down. Gao Yanghong respectfully flew to Sun Qin's side. His eyes were full of awe. He secretly thought that Sun Qin was indeed worthy of being the sect master. He was able to completely repair the damaged transmission array in the underground chamber through the transmission array here. You're tuning in to the Passion Pages YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.